Hi, everybody. Welcome to 1999, the podcast. This is a special edition of the podcast because today, if you can believe it or not, is May the 19th, 2024, which means it is the 25th anniversary of the release of Phantom Menace. A number that, when I say it out loud, just sounds literally unbelievable. The last 25 years have gone by pretty quickly for a lot of us, and so many of us remember everything leading up to the release of Phantom Menace, the summer of Phantom Menace, so very, very well. And it is a movie that has gone on to have a special place in many of our hearts as the years have gone by. So to celebrate the release of the Phantom Menace and its legacy, we are presenting you with a few special treats today. We asked some friends of the podcast, new and old, to share some of their thoughts with us about their memories of the film. And then we're going to follow that up with a re-release of the second episode we ever did of this show, our Phantom Menace episode from 2 years ago, with me and Joey Lewandowski, joined by Return of the Pod co-hosts Brian Silliman and Matt Romano. So stick around for that. But we are going to start today with some thoughts from Nikki Gallegos, horror author, podcaster, Star Wars fanatic, and all-around great person.
As a kid, I used to watch the original trilogy and play with my Micro Machine toys, which I still have, I would like to add. And whenever Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, came out, my mom took me to the theater, and I remember just being absolutely blown away. Gungan City was gorgeous. I think visually, The Phantom Menace is probably the most beautiful Star Wars movie that exists, but the one moment that stuck out the most to me was Darth Maul's double-bladed lightsaber. I somehow didn't know it was going to happen, and whenever he unveiled the second side, I just lost it. The pod racing, which also is an incredible video game that I have never beaten. Phantom Menace just started out my love for the prequel trilogy right off the gate, and I thank it so much.
Hey, this is Nick from Film Shake, the 90s Movies podcast, recording this spot for the podcast dedicated to the greatest year in human history, 1999, talking about my Episode 1 experience. I was a huge Star Wars fan. I turned 18 in 1999. The day the movie came out, my friend Robbie and I left school, got in his car. It was his mom's Crown Vic with a V10 engine that sounded like a jet engine, and we roared that thing down the highway to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, got to the movie theater, watched the film. I absolutely loved it. I went to church that night. I went to school the next day. All I could think about was the Phantom Menace. I went back and saw the movie 5 times that summer. Just absolutely adored it. I mean, I had watched the original trilogy so many times up to that point, but I was really psyched. I listened to the soundtrack all summer, and then a year later I went to college, and I found out it wasn't cool to like Episode 1, and unfortunately, as the prequels unfolded, it just wasn't cool to like them, and I wanted to be cool, so they were disappointments to me, and they really weren't what I was expecting. I had the whole prequel trilogy in my mind already of what I thought they would be, and they're not that. But as I got older, and maybe because some other Star Wars movies were released that I don't really like very much, I started to appreciate the prequels more and more, and I came back to loving them. You know what? When I was 17, I think I was a smart guy, and I was smart to love The Phantom Menace. It's such an enjoyable movie. For all its flaws, it's not perfect. I mean, Jar Jar, sorry, I don't love him. I wish he was in the movie half as much as he is. Natalie Portman, a little wooden in the movie. Jake Lloyd, I think he's fine for a kid. He does great. Ewan McGregor, awesome. Liam Neeson, awesome. Really, I enjoy everything about this film, even the things that aren't good. Even Jar Jar, as much as he annoys me, that's a great motion capture performance. It's all good to me. This movie is a part of the fabric of my life, and I love it. Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, the movie of 1999. It might not be the best film of 1999, but it is the movie that to me is most emblematic of that great year, the greatest year in cinema, the greatest year in human history. Yes.
My name is Mike Manzi. I'm co-founder of the Cage Club Podcast Network. And 25 years ago in this very galaxy, I was there watching The Phantom Menace on opening night with my best friends from high school. And the thing I remember most is probably being completely overwhelmed. I had been waiting half a lifetime for more Star Wars content. I was born in 79. I'm approaching 45. This was everything to me. And looking back, it is really hard to explain the scope of the madness that was surrounding the release of the first Star Wars prequel. And we knew we were getting 2 more after this, so the anticipation was at a maximum. Boy oh boy, that first screening was a lot. I mean, from Jar Jar to the pod racing to the Duel of Fates to Darth Maul to all of the extra lore that was being expanded and explored, all of the incredible visuals. I mean, it was more than I was expecting, and it took some time to process. And I think actually, I'm still processing it. But having recently watched the movie for the first time in a few years, I realized, man, this thing has held up. I still like it a lot. Compared to the new plethora of Star Wars media that we are getting, it still ranks in the top for me. So here we are 25 years later, looking back, and man, do I feel fortunate that we got this movie when we did. May the Force be with you.
Bright Suns, it's Matt Romano from Return of the Pod, a podcast about Star Wars and more. And I'm riding solo today. Brian and Kaylin are off-world on another adventure, but it's a pleasure to be here with you all on 1999, the podcast, celebrating the 25th anniversary, 25 years of Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. I was 16 when this movie came out, and I'll never forget cutting gym class so I could get in line to purchase my tickets. And looking back, it's crazy to think how much hype there was for this movie. I don't think kids today really understand just how crazy a deal this was. The years leading up to its premiere, you had the release of the original trilogy on VHS, the THX remaster, then the re-release of the original trilogy special editions in theaters, then again released on VHS. If you own both box sets, you know what I'm talking about. Then there was the multimedia extravaganza that was Shadows of the Empire, a personal favorite, Return of the Pod. But all of this and more brought Star Wars back front and center to the cultural zeitgeist, and then it happened. They dropped Episode 1, and nothing was the same ever since in the galaxy far, far away. If you lived through this time, you surely have your own memories, but I, for one, just can't forget the endless amounts of marketing for this movie. It seemed like there was a tie-in with virtually every product on the planet. There was Episode 1 toilet paper. No joke. Look it up. It happened. Or maybe not. But anyway, I can sit here and talk all day about what I love and maybe not love about this movie, but hey, it's not my podcast. But I will say, now 25 years older with kids of my own, taking them to see Phantom Menace in theaters is something I will never forget. And I don't know why I was surprised, but the battle droids with all their Roger Rogers and of course Jar Jar stole the show for my kids, just like Lucas intended. And I get it now. I see the light that is the Phantom Menace. I understand. But is Phantom Menace a great movie?
I'm the only human who can do it.
Maybe. Is it the best Star Wars? Probably not.
There's always a bigger fish.
But it succeeded in introducing a new generation of fans to the franchise and opened the door for all of the Star Wars that we love today. As George likes to say, it rhymes. And I love that.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme, every stanza kind of rhymes with the last one.
So, happy 25th birthday, Phantom Menace. And one more thing. Whoever had the great idea to name the last track on the soundtrack The Death of Qui-Gon Jinn before the movie came out, spoiling the entire end of the movie, that wasn't cool. Anyway, many boats, be the spark, and thanks to 1999 the podcast for having us on.
Well, technically, Matt, it was Qui-Gon's noble end. It's not quite the same as the death of Qui-Gon Jinn or whatever, but yeah, I take your point. Thank you to all 4 of you for sharing those thoughts. Gives me the warm Star Wars fuzzies to listen to all of that. I just want to say before we get into the bulk of the episode, in which I say a lot, and so does Matt, and so does Brian, and so does Joey to some extent. But the 3 of us, of course, me, Matt, and Brian are the big Star Wars fans on that particular panel. So I have a lot to say about The Phantom Menace in the episode, so I'm not going to overdo it here. But I just do want to say for context that One of the reasons I decided to start doing this podcast, these couple of years ago, first with Joey and now with Jen, and have been loving doing it ever since, is because of the Phantom Menace. And 1999 would not have been as formative a year for me, both sort of personally and also in terms of film. Had it not been for that movie, it still would have been arguably one of the greatest film years of all time, but I'm not sure that it would have the same kind of emotional resonance that it has with me, which is what made me want to do this show in the first place, without having Phantom Menace at the center of it. Seeing the Phantom Menace and the anticipation for the Phantom Menace is not something that there's ever a comparison to before, nor will there be now in the days of being able to book your tickets and your seats online quite easily and not having to go through a dial-up 56K modem and have the Fandango website crash or whatever as you're trying to do it. For the Phantom Menace, I stood in line a week before the movie opened at Framingham 14 Cinemas in Framingham, Massachusetts, along with several hundred other people with plastic lightsabers and just the joy of childhood on their faces, regardless of what their age was. Part of the greatness of that experience was the bonding and was the community that emerged out of it. One of the things, of course, that the Phantom Menace is famous for is the immediate sort of backlash and that the movie was not what certain people were expecting. And one of the things that I found really interesting is that the people who tend to like it the most over the years are people who are roughly my age, that is to say, early to mid 40s, late 30s, in that general range. And I think there's a really good reason for that. And that's that a lot of the Star Wars fans who at the time were in their 30s or even 40s had grown up not just with the original trilogy, but had seen the original trilogy in the theaters when it came out. Whereas, we're of the generation who saw the original trilogy on VHS, and it was sort of already a kind of cultural thing. There was nothing really kind of mind-blowingly new about it like it was there was with its first run in theaters. And so I thought about the way that kind of ownership or the feeling of kind of ownership over a franchise or a property among the fandom is kind of different depending on what age you're at. Certainly, as Nick points out, there was among people our age a sort of uncoolness to liking the Phantom Menace that set in sort of immediately. But one of the things that makes it different as a movie is that, unlike the original trilogy, it was never meant to be a self-contained story. And so, A New Hope sort of works as a narrative from beginning to end, where the Phantom Menace, there's more coming, and it's just inherently kind of a tantalizing ending, where you want more immediately, and you want to expand the world and explore it more, and it kind of leaves you a little cold because it's like reading a chapter of a book and having to close it for 3 years. And that was a tough and new experience for a lot of us. I think as the prequel trilogy unfolded and all George Lucas's various shortcomings as a scriptwriter and director of actors aside, built something interesting and new and that we fell in love with in a very different sort of way. And I think the revisionism for Phantom Menace is largely rightly due to that. We go back and look at it now, and we see this incredibly beautiful film, as Nikki Gallego says. It is the most stunning looking Star Wars movie ever made. It's one of the most stunning looking movies ever made. It is absolutely gorgeous to look at. There are shots in there that you're just never going to find in any of the sequel trilogies or anything else like that. And I love all those things. I love all Star Wars. I'm not dissing anything. But there's a certain sort of artistry to the Phantom Menace that is unique to that one particular movie. So that, I always loved it. I was immediately sort of like, okay, this is new and different and weird. And I had to go see it in the theater 12 times, which I did that summer to really get it to sink in. I have loved it ever since. I've had backwards and forwards relationships with it, but I took my kids to see it last weekend. And just sort of watching it with fresh eyes and realizing just how great it is. And this movie that, was was knocked for being too geared towards 12-year-olds or children, is geared towards 12-year-olds and children, right? As Matt says, battle droids and Jar Jar Binks, the kids loved it. And that's often their favorite part. And there's something really endearing about that. And also that it was trying to create the sort of sense of innocence and beauty that was lost when the Empire came to power. So I also think I'd be remiss without saying that we should take a closer look at one of the main criticisms of the Phantom Menace, which is that it deals with trade disputes and minutia that's very difficult to pierce or understand or really get the stakes of. Anybody who knows what the actual story is knows that those things are a diversion, that they're not even real, that it is a Phantom Menace. See also the title. But also, as we approach the rising tide of fascism once again, as we look to the demise of democracy, to thunderous applause once again in our own history as we're heading that way, I think it's important to look at what the Phantom Menace is trying to say, which is that one of the reasons that fascism rises to power is because of minutia that people tune out, of trade disputes and of these political machinations that nobody can make heads or tails of and that they think have nothing to do with a bigger picture. Phantom Menace tells us to always be wary and to protect freedom and democracy in our galaxy and elsewhere. That is our charge, and we lose it when we lose sight of that, and when we lose sight of the bigger picture, and when we lose sight of what we are supposed to be doing and what we are for, what the Jedi are for, which is not to be negotiators in a trade dispute. That is a society that is off the rails, and I think there are some important lessons that we should have learned over the last 25 years that I hope are not too late to learn now, in this incredibly beautiful and wise and moving movie that will be a big place in my Star Wars heart for the rest of my life. So happy Star Wars Anniversary Day to you all. Go watch The Phantom Menace. Go watch it through the eyes of a kid, either your own kids or the kid who lives somewhere deep in your soul. And may the Force be with you, and many boats. Enjoy our episode from 2 years ago with Joey Lewandowski and Matt Romano and Brian Silliman from The Return of the Pod on Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Welcome to 1999, the podcast. I'm John Brooks.
And I'm Joey Lewandowski.
And this is episode 2.
No, it's episode 1.
Oh, wait. You're ruining everything. You're jumping ahead, Joey.
Oh, my God.
This is episode 2 of the podcast. Our second movie, released May 19th, 1999, and starring Liam Neeson, Ewan McGregor, Natalie Portman, Ian McDiarmid, Jake Lloyd, Pernilla August, Ahmed Best, Frank Oz, Anthony Daniels, Kenny Baker, and Keira Knightley, is Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace.
Yeah.
You've heard of this one, right?
Yeah, I've heard of Star Wars. I think I'm well versed in well versed is us. I think our guests tonight are going to be more well versed than I am in Star Wars, given who they are and so on and so forth. But we'll get to that later.
We will get to that later, but our guests are indeed among the wellest versed when it comes to all things Star Wars. This is always a weird one for me because this movie and everything that was surrounding it and everything that's happened afterwards, it really does stand out among the 1999 canon as an anomaly. It really sort of like, it's Star Wars, and everything else that happened around this movie that year really did happen around it. It's kind of like talking about the British invasion and like every band that isn't the Beatles.
Well, like I feel, there's obviously a lot of good movies this year, and this is not my favorite movie that we will talk about, but I think that like maybe more so than any other movie, this is what makes that year bigger than most other years, just because it had been like 16 years or whatever since the Star Wars.
So this wasn't just the highest grossing movie of that year. It had what was then at the time the largest one-day gross of all time at $28 million, at least 7 of which were mine.
Cool.
Yeah. It opened just shy of $65 million for the weekend, which at the time was the second best ever. And it was the fastest movie to ever get to the $100 million gross mark. And that just took 5 days, which is pretty stunning, especially when you think of the difference in ticket prices in 1999 as opposed to today.
Yeah.
They cost about half of what they did, or what they do now.
Do you still have your ticket stub for the Phantom Menace?
I still have a few of my ticket stubs for Phantom Menace. I definitely have my opening day ones. I have at least one from Cinerama in Seattle where I saw it like 4 times, which was a really cool way to see it. But yeah, I definitely have my opening day stub.
Cool.
I could check what the actual price was, but I think it was $7. That sticks in my head for some reason. Although it might have been one of the movies that started pushing the ticket price up to like 9, but whatever.
Well, just like today when they're like, we're going to charge more for the Batman because we can, and you're going to go see it
Right.
anyway. It's like, well, okay, I guess this is how we're going to do things now. Okay.
I only go to the movies a few times a year now, but it's like $15. That's pretty
Depends
much
on where you
standard.
are. Also, like, for we're getting off topic, but for Too Fast, Too Forever, when we went to see Hobbs and Shaw, we posted tickets online. They were like, people, especially down, because we have a lot of people, like, we bought followers on Facebook, and a lot of them are people who like cars down like in Alabama and stuff. They're like, how much is a movie ticket? We're like, it's just what it is, man. It's just, it's
Yeah.
$16 for IMAX or whatever. And like, it's crazy, but that's
Yeah.
what it is.
Well, it remained number 1 for 5 weeks. It has since grossed over $1 billion at the box office, which isn't bad for a movie that, as legend has it, everyone hated, I guess. That's sort of the memory that a lot of people have, is that this was a universally hated movie. So it's weird that it would make that much. So, okay, that's worth talking about then. Did everybody really hate it? Well, currently on Rotten Tomatoes, it has a rating of just 51%.
That's not bad. That's not terrible.
It's not terrible,
It's not
but it's not
good.
good. No. Well, 51%, I guess, rotten, because, right, if it's below 60, it's rotten. And weirdly, it's got the exact same score on Metacritic, which almost never happens. So they're both 51% on both of those aggregators, and they use different metrics, so it's very rare that you would actually hit the same number. Anyway, among the lukewarm reviews, which were pretty much the majority of reviews, were like not terrible but not great. Kenneth Turan of the LA Times said that while the new film is certainly serviceable, it's noticeably lacking in warmth and humor, and though its visual strengths are real and considerable, from a dramatic point of view, it's ponderous and plodding. And I don't necessarily completely disagree with that. Like, if I'm going to criticize the Phantom Menace, I think those are the terms I'd use. Like, I think that's where I'd kind of aim my criticism. I don't know.
I think with this is a very arbitrary metric, and I don't know that it really applies to something like Star Wars, which is like of the epic nature or whatever. But I think when you get over 2 hours, it's like, do we really need a movie to be over 2 hours? And if you look at this one, it's like 216, which is not crazy. I just mentioned the Batman, that's like 250 or whatever, right? Like that's insane.
Yeah.
But like 216, it's like, do we need any movie to be that long? I don't know.
I think that's true, and especially because George Lucas in general isn't great at pacing, and maybe the combination of the length of the movie itself and just this sort of, this thing that one of the several things that George Lucas just isn't very good at. He's very good at other things, right? Like I don't want to say that he's like a bad filmmaker. He's a great filmmaker. He just has some obvious handicaps, right? Like even ones that he will admit to. And I think maybe that's probably true. There's a few real naysayers. I think the one that I found who's most scathing is Slate's David Edelstein, who's a really great critic. But he said, George Lucas does it his way in the pallid Phantom Menace. Even cultists will wish he'd hired a director and some writers.
Ooh.
Well, and having said that, like, one of the things that we forget is that this was George Lucas's third movie he ever directed in a career that went back to the mid 70s. So up until this point, he'd only directed American Graffiti, the original Star Wars, and that's it.
Yeah, but like those are two great movies, like great movies. Like American Graffiti, like no shade to Star Wars, but like American Graffiti is like maybe the Star Wars too, but like top 50 movie of all time, maybe. Like it's incredible.
It is a great movie, but if you watch Empire of Dreams, for instance, right, the documentary about the making of A New Hope, you really understand that, again, like, the actual creation of a narrative film is not something that George Lucas excels at.
I can see that.
His then wife is really responsible for editing the thing that we have now, down to size.
So what is he good at? Is he like, is it world building? Like, what does he excel at? Or like just feel?
That's a really, we'll talk about it in the episode. He's very, very, I guess what we would now call world building, I think, is a really fair way to say it.
Like, he just makes places that you kind of want to spend time in.
Yes, and he's also the thing that gets overlooked about George Lucas is that he's also very good at connecting story to image. And so much of his
like visual storytelling, or what do you mean by that?
I mean, in terms of using what you're seeing as a means of conveying story and human emotion, as opposed to acting and writing, right? Which I'm not saying this as a dig at all. I really do mean that that's true. The Phantom Menace. If you watch the Phantom Menace, one of the things that's very clear about it is that his ability to frame a shot and to the placement of camera, right, is really impeccable. I mean, it really is unlike anybody else. I just think he has a hard time distilling that into a storyline that is for public consumption. I misspoke when I said he'd only directed 2 other movies. Of course, he directed the third one, THX, and that's a really good example of what I'm talking about, right?
I've never seen that. I just know it as a license plate.
Visually, it's incredible. It's a really great work of science fiction, but it's kind of a narrative mess, right? And it's everything that George Lucas is really good at and everything that he's bad at, kind of exposed there. Anyway, I wonder if Edelstein has softened on this stance over time, because again, I'm not sure that he's necessarily wrong in anything that he says in that review, but his sort of final verdict is a little bit harsh. Anyway, it wasn't all bad news. Like, one of the things we forget is that a lot of major name critics gave the film either good to glowing reviews. Among them are Entertainment Weekly's Owen Gleiberman, the New York Times' Janet Maslin, and of course the Chicago Sun-Times' Roger Ebert, who gave the film 3.5 stars and said, perhaps presciently, quote, "There's a sense of discovery in scene after scene of The Phantom Menace, as he tries out new effects and ideas and seamlessly integrates real characters and digital ones, real landscapes and imaginary places. We are standing at the threshold of a new age of epic cinema, in which digital technique means that budgets will no longer limit the scope of scenes. Filmmakers will be able to show us just about anything they can imagine." It's like, yep, you got it right. You nailed it. That is exactly what Phantom Menace did, and exactly where we kind of find ourselves, right, with the ability to craft worlds that were previously unthinkable. I mean, look at a movie like Endgame, right? It's just like it's just stunning how easy it is that we can just sort of will these sort of imaginary places into existence now.
Yeah.
So I think they're all right. I agree with all of these critics, and we'll talk more about that in the episode. And either way, The Phantom Menace should be understood, at least in part, as having been the single most anticipated movie of all time. And I think that part of it really, really, really matters. There will never be a movie that is this anticipated. And I wouldn't even be able to describe how that...
You don't think like Endgame was as anticipated as this?
Because Endgame didn't take 17 years to come out, right?
No, but it did. It took, in a sense, it took 11 years to come out.
Yes, that is true. But in the time between Return of the Jedi and Phantom Menace, there was not only not a new Star Wars movie, there was the sense that there might never be a new Star Wars movie, right? You don't ever think there's not going to be another Marvel movie.
Yeah.
And even if it took 17 years for the next Marvel movie to come out, it still wouldn't have this level of anticipation.
Well, I mean, we're recording this live from Camp Feige, where he's planning out the next 10 years of Marvel movies, right? So we know that they're not going away.
Yeah.
And I think it is telling in a certain sense, to bring it back to Star Wars for a second, that like Star Wars essentially was doing the same thing, and then they're like, this isn't working. Like, the people don't really want this, and they fixed it or shifted it or are trying to fix it or something, right? So
yeah, we'll pick this up when we have our conversation with our guest today. But I don't think that can be overstated, the importance or the sort of the handicap that the Phantom Menace had in just the absolutely both unprecedented but also unrepeatable level of anticipation and expectation that came along with it. Some people have said that it would be impossible for the Phantom Menace to not disappoint, no matter what it was, right? It would disappoint people. Like there's just no version of it that wasn't going to let someone or a lot of people down because of what you imagine a movie to be in the 17-year absence since, your favorite 3 movies of all time have had a sequel. But anyway, we will come back to that point later on in our conversation today. Anyway, it's clear that a movie that made $1 kajillion must have had something going for it beyond just the Star Wars name. There's no way a movie makes this much money unless, people find something about it they like, or someone like me who goes back and sees it again and again and again, because I loved it, and I've always loved it, and I love it differently now than I did then. And I, again, agree with the negative reviews as well as the positive ones. I acknowledge the flaws, and I'm not blind to them. But I love this movie, and I'm very excited to talk about it today. So, Joey, who are today's guests?
our guests today are the hosts of Return of the Pod, a podcast about Star Wars, Brian Silliman, Matt Romano, and Caitlin M. Bush.
Except, unfortunately...
Did you do it again?
Yeah, I keep making people sick. Caitlin is under the weather, and we hope that she gets back over the weather sometime soon. We were hoping to have her on. It's not that we didn't invite her. We certainly did, and we wish her all the best. But Brian and Matt are indeed with us today, and we'll be talking all things Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Cool. So with that, we will take a break, and we will be right back. Matt Romano and Brian Silliman, welcome to 1999, the podcast. You two are 2 of the 3 hosts of Return of the Pod, a podcast about Star Wars. I think that's the full title, right?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Right? Colon.
Last I checked.
A podcast about Star Wars.
Yeah.
Why don't you guys tell us, because I don't actually know, how do you guys know each... Well, you have a third member who is not with us tonight, but how do you guys know each other, and how did you get your podcast started?
Matt had me in for a meeting in his office and hired me.
Nice.
Back in the day.
Yeah, we all used to work. Well, some of us still work there, but
you saw him at a drugstore. He was looking at comics.
Exactly.
Look at that kid. Yeah.
But we worked at the Sci-Fi Channel, and we did a podcast called Job of the Pod, a podcast about Star Wars. And then unfortunately that ended, and myself, Brian, and Caitlin went on our own for Return of the Pod, a podcast about Star Wars. Very clever titling there. And now our show is better than ever, and we're here with you lovely folks on this podcast.
So you're just doing it for the love now. There's no corporate backing. There's no big man telling you how to feel about Attack of the Clones.
Stars, they're just like us, John.
Exactly. But if there's any corporations that would like to sponsor the show and pay us to do it, we'll do it in a heartbeat.
We will sell out so quickly.
Return of the Pod is brought to you by My Pillow. My Pillow, only the best for taking over the government.
Wow.
So I'm not just saying this because I've known Brian for years, but there's a lot of Star Wars podcasts on the market. A lot of people do the Star Wars podcast. Yours is the best.
Thank you.
And why is yours the best?
The Venmo just cleared.
Nice. Oh, yeah, cha-ching. No, here's why I like your podcast. Because I like Brian. No, it is because I like Brian. It's nice to hear an old friend talking to my ear holes as I'm mowing the lawn or whatever.
Well, the weird. I want to establish the weird backstory to this. That we had
Sure.
Brian on Too Fast, Too Forever before I knew that you knew him for 20 years. Like that's the weirdest. Like we just met him. We met a stranger on the internet who was tweeting about Fast and Furious, and then he's like, "Hey, my friend Brian." Right? We met you through Chris, I think. Right?
Yeah, you met me through Chris Malika.
Who I also
and then
know.
John. And then John was like, "Oh, I know them," and I'm like, "Wait, hold on, what?" So it's just weird that like we met a stranger who was like tweeting about Brian. I don't know, man. Not this Brian. Brian O'Connor, Paul Walker.
Yeah.
Who John on our most recent episode of Too Fast said he is a vanilla charm. So it's just a weird like. I backed my way into a 20-year friendship accidentally. So bizarre, man.
I remember I ran into you years ago. I don't even remember, in a coffee shop, and I had a different Star Wars podcast on, and that was back when I was dabbling around listening to some of them here and there. And I was like, someday I'd like to do. I'd love to do it, but I don't know what it would be or whatever. And you were like, yeah, it would be great because like there's some things we liked about some of them, some things we didn't like about others. But I know Matt and I don't know if this speaks to why it's. Whether it's the best or whatever, that's absolutely subjective. But I know one thing that Matt and I, from our very first meeting about the old show and about this one, and Caitlin agrees completely, is positivity first. It's celebrate.
I just give a big thumbs up. You can.
Yeah, it's yes. Even when there are problems, whatever, celebrate the problems. Even when it's like something we might not quite like, don't say it's bad. We say it's not for me. It's going to be for somebody. If this is entertainment, if we're not enjoying these things, if we're not enjoying this, then we can turn it off. It's if you're taking such displeasure from this thing where you need to go on these 4-hour rants and then start sending hate mail and then making death threat videos and everything,
or documentaries.
Do evaluate your life choices. And we just wanted to get out of that. No drama with other podcasts or other stuff like this. Celebrate this thing that we all have a lot of fun with. And if you're not having fun, don't watch it, because there's enough crap going on. So that was my only thing going in the middle. And Matt, that was you were right there with it, thankfully.
Oh yeah.
Like, we were on the same page with that completely. And so is Caitlin. So there will be things that we were not faking it we'll always find things to like, even, it's just that it exists. But in this, it's the cycle, right? It's you can't wait. What gets old is we can't wait. Oh, we can't wait for Phantom Menace. We can't wait for Phantom Menace. Phantom Menace comes out, and everyone's just outraged and it slams or whatever. And then years later, oh, we can't wait for Force Awakens. Can't wait for Force Awakens. And then it comes out and everyone's like, after a nice little grace period, it sucks. And then oh, we can't wait for the Kenobi trailer. Oh, when is it going to drop? When is it going to drop? It drops and like, it looks sad. It's stupid. We don't like the way the Grand Inquisitor's head.
Oh, right.
It's like, it's this nonstop cycle. It's Benicio del Toro's in the corner telling me, it's like, blow him up today, blow him up tomorrow. And I'm like, that gets absolutely exhausting. And so I have made a concerted effort to unplug from that, because I literally cannot stand it anymore.
I do have a genuine question about that, though, because I think of the four of us, just based on the fact that I know John is literally wearing a Star Wars hoodie right now, and you guys have a podcast about Star Wars. Like, I am by far and away the most baby Star Wars fan, and I like it. I want to like it more than I do. I just am at the wrong age, and I didn't grow up with it. And like, I like it, I enjoy it, but it's not my thing. And I don't say that condescendingly. It's just like I have other like Fast and Furious, whatever. That's dumb. Whatever. That's my thing. Anyway. So you guys, you wait years and years and years. It's been, 15, 16 years since Return of the Jedi. There's this whole thing where people buy tickets to go see a movie to watch the trailer for this. Like, it's this whole thing. You get down, you sit down there, opening night, opening weekend, whatever.
Yep. And they slept through it and then watched the trailer again.
And almost the first words that you see on screen are the taxation of trade routes. Like, what goes through your mind? Like, and I know this is like a point of contention that people like, poke fun or, make fun of this movie about, but like, genuinely, when you're like, okay, Star Wars, here we go, lightsabers, we got Yoda, we got the origin, like, this is where Darth Vader began, and the first words you see on screen are the taxation of trade routes. Like, are you worried? Are you cool with that? Like, what's going through your mind in the theater in 19? Because I'm assuming everybody except for me saw this in theaters in 1999. Is that right?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah.
I cut
Jim.
Well, yeah.
What's going through your mind?
You cut Jim?
I cut Jim to see Phantom Menace in 1999.
Yet he made it to the Olympics anyway.
And yet here you are. Yeah, you graduated and everything. It's amazing. Without
We
Jim.
Yeah. Well, you know what the funny part about it is, you mentioned growing up with Star Wars, and like every generation grew up with their flavor of Star Wars. So obviously, I'd imagine.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
Exactly. No, exactly. You listen to the pod.
Yeah. And I watched the first trailer, so I know where he gets it from. A lot of times.
Yeah, it is.
But obviously being children of the original trilogy, and I remember watching the prequels, and I remember just being. Listen, honestly, it took me years to appreciate how good they are. Because I think in the grand scheme of things and seeing how the trilogy played out, then seeing the Clone Wars cartoon and all the ancillary material that came after that, like there's a lot more to appreciate in the prequels than there was at the time seeing it for the very first time. So I do remember being a little like taxation, trade routes, like this is, it was a little bonkers, but looking back now,
are those really the stakes?
Exactly. but looking back now, it's very Star Wars. Star Wars is so many of the best Star Wars stories is about bureaucracy and just casual government. But yeah, I mean, looking back, it was pretty ridiculous at the time, but that it's come such a long way with all the other storytelling that they've done around it.
And it's followed up directly with the Nemoidians, who weren't an instant hit with audiences. And it's like, you're instantly like, we're in for not what we were expecting.
Yeah.
And a little like rinky-dinky ship coming towards the camera as opposed to a massive, Star Destroyer going away from it at close range. And like, I mean, there's a lot of, we can talk about the ring theory and all that stuff, which I will, and it's awesome.
Oh, I think John explained this to me on the way to a Red Sox game a few years ago, and I forget 100%. John just talked Star Wars at me for 45 minutes while driving through like outside of Boston traffic.
It's like, John, there's no microphone in this car.
Yeah, it's probably true. No, but it is part of that. Like, it is literally the opposite of the way that A New Hope starts, and the way that you expect a Star Wars movie to start. And I think there's something sort of subversive about that, right? That it's almost like that Lucas was like, this is a different movie.
Matt, you hit on it a little bit, where that ship coming in is in hindsight, at the time, it was weird. The first time was weird. And so it's like, you go and see it the second time. So it's like to let it set. And it's like, okay, and then the third time, because, okay, this is different, but we're still having a blast. It's like, and that ship now is one of my favorite designs. I love the design of that ship.
I love that
because we've since seen it in Clone Wars all the time. It's like now with 7 seasons of Clone Wars and all of this prequel renaissance that's happened now, that I mean, John, you and I, at least, and I think Matt was there for a little of it, remember there's Return of the Jedi, and then there was the Dark Times, where we had Heir to the Empire, West End Games, and that was it. So part of me is like, this is a new movie. I don't really care what this is. We have a new movie, and there's two more well on the way, and it was like, be grateful for what we're getting, and it was. But if anyone thought the Ewoks were a little too kid friendly, it's hold my spotchka.
I have a question. I have a very quick question, and I could have looked up, but I wanted to ask you guys, because I remember the prequels being announced as a trilogy. And I think the original one, I don't think any of you were alive when the first one came out, but did A New Hope come out as the start of a trilogy, or was that a standalone movie that then it was just one?
Which is why it's a closed story, right? Why it could have been the only movie, and it would have been a satisfying hero story.
This is the first time in Star Wars, it's like, this is not the only thing you're getting. This is building toward, especially like as a prequel, but it's building towards something, but it's also like there's 3 parts leading up to a thing. So this is like a whole new way to watch these movies for the first time in ever.
It's true, because even with Empire Strikes Back, leaving it open-ended, that was still a gamble. I mean, there was a whole backdoor thing. That's how Splinter of the Mind's Eye exists, is because here's our cheap way of doing a sequel in case this movie bombs. And up until pretty much the John Williams score was added and it was re-edited, everyone thought it was going to. And so at that point, that was also when he was going to do 12. He was going to do 12 of these things, and pretty much burnt out by the third one. But yeah, you're right. This is going to be a trilogy no matter what. We're making 3 movies.
And I think it's I think it might be the first ever to do that. I can't think of another example that something was planned as a 3-part trilogy. I don't.
Only Lord of the Rings comes to mind.
But that was later.
Yeah. Oh, before this. Yeah. No, I can't. Yeah.
I remember. I mean, it's different. It's also after this, but I remember before I knew who Tarantino was, I was in theaters and I'm like, who's this guy thinking Kill Bill Volume 1? Like, who has the balls to do a part 1? And that's not the same, but it's also just like, I mean, not that a Tarantino movie is going to flop after everything he had put out before, but still, like, to say like this is the part 1 of 2, no matter how the first one does, there's going to be a part 2, or at least this is going to be an unfinished story. So there's still like. There's something to that, I think.
It's a sure bet these days than Netflix is, I'll tell you that.
Right.
It's like, oh, we planned 8 seasons. It's like canceled after 1.
Yeah.
Matt, I know the period between Return of the Jedi and Phantom Menace was not dark for you because your favorite character, Dash Rendar, had a lot of.
Damn right. Thank you for
time.
That's right.
I don't think I've ever even heard that name before.
Don't worry about it, Joey.
But Matt, how old were you when Phantom Menace came out?
Oh, geez. 15, 16 years old? Yeah.
Okay. So what was you cut gym class to go see it? So did you see it like on the Friday it opened and
I remember I saw it like I think it was like a 2:00 show on a Friday or something, but like left school, saw Phantom Menace, immediately saw it again that same weekend. I think I saw each of the prequels 3 times in theaters. But you mentioned Dash Rendar and like Shadows of the Empire and
let's talk about Dash Rendar.
Let's talk about Dash Rendar. But when Brian talks about all these like the dark times between Return of the Jedi and Phantom Menace, there was just so much Star Wars, but it just wasn't really like mainstream outside of the video games.
Yeah.
And Dash Rendar might have been like the most mainstream Star Wars thing between Jedi and Phantom Menace.
What is he from? What is that?
It's this thing called Shadows of the Empire, and it was sandwiched between Empire and Jedi, and it was here's the story of what happens there, and some things in there have now found their way into modern stories, like the Feline and Zizor got a comic reference and stuff, but it was a book, which is how I know it. It was a video game for N64, which is how Matt knows it.
Graphic novel.
It was a graphic novel. It was a soundtrack. It was everything but a movie.
It's a very good score, by the way. It's a really good Star Wars soundtrack. I love it. Yeah.
I wish I still had a copy of it, but it was, and we loved it because that's what we had. That's what we got. There's this disgusting seduction scene of this reptile named Zizor, pheromones, and Princess Leia, and she's like, "Oh, he's gorgeous. I should take off. I wish I didn't wear a bodysuit under this." And it's so disgusting. But I was like, this is interesting at the time, and looking back, it's fascinating, and we took it. And there was a gradual renaissance with the Super Star Wars games on for Super Nintendo. They relaunched the figure line, building up to the special editions because they knew they gradually eased us in to get ready.
Yeah, well, the special edition re-releases, then also, I mean, just like that urban legend that like Lucas had written. Parts, 1 through 3, and that there were always these like 3 untold stories that we haven't heard. And then in building your own headcanon over the years, just by the mention of Clone Wars in A New Hope, compounded on all this other Star Wars stuff. I mean, like, I don't think anybody knew what the prequels were going to be.
No. And there were some things like we knew at some point Anakin versus Obi-Wan and Lava.
Yeah.
If anyone is saying it's like, oh, I called Boss Nass back in 85.
Exactly.
No, they didn't. It's that's the thing. I think that was part of the I think it was detrimental to the movie that there were so many years of headcanon going on.
For sure.
This
and
is
the same thing happened with the sequel trilogy, I think.
Absolutely.
Even like that.
With every series. It's going to be a persistent problem with Star Wars until it finally ends. It's going to be people's headcanons. They've accepted their wishes and they want it to be their own personal way. So when it deviates from that, if it gets a little silly or if it gets too, some people deal with it well. It's like, well, it's not your story to tell. So accept this is the story. This is how the creators want it to go. And now that it's not Lucas, people have a new, it's like, oh, raging at Disney. And I'm like, Disney just cares about the dollars. It's like, but I remember the time is all of a sudden Lucas is this untouchable hero. It's like, let's remember back in 99, he was getting, as you already touched on, John, he was getting blasted. He was having documentaries made about him, like a fictitious court case. Like he was getting roasted everywhere to the point where he sold it off and said goodbye. So
Yeah.
it's that is, and now all of a sudden he's this high, Mozart like figure. And I'm like, where did this come from? It's because the kids that this was for. We talk about this all the time. Phantom Menace, especially, is at its heart for kids.
Yeah.
And kids loved it. And the kids that have grown up with it, they now have nostalgia for it. So Mandalorian dropped some Phantom Menace images in it. And they're like, oh, the nostalgia. I'm like, for what? 99? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm old.
Well, that's the same amount of time, like, it's been longer since Phantom Menace came out than between New Hope and Phantom Menace. So,
That's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I want to reset for a second. So I think Matt said earlier that he saw this 3 times in theaters. I know that John told me a ridiculous number. Before John says his number, because I texted my family, and our family texted. I'm just like, did we see this in theaters? And no one can remember. So if we did, it did not make an impact. Because I was 11 for 1999. So
you went to Wild Wild West instead?
If I saw any movie that we're doing this podcast in theaters that year, it would have been this movie. Because there's literally no other movie. I looked through the list that I would have seen in theaters. I just didn't see movies in theaters. Matt said 3 times. Brian, how many times did you see this in theaters?
I believe it was 3 for me as well.
So John's number is the actual outlier.
I'm pretty sure I know what John's number is. I remember he told me. I was like, wow.
Because I said earlier, I saw this more than any other Star Wars movie, and John's like, I think that's true of me too. I'm like, yeah, but I think your number is probably higher than my 3 or 4.
And this is not like at home on video and through the years.
No, how many times
in the theater? This is in the theater.
I want to put in context that there is a guy in Florida. 13 times. There's a guy in Florida who just saw Spider-Man 292 times in theater, so it's not that.
That's too many.
Yeah.
That's too many.
Yeah.
But that is too many Spider-Man.
13 is a lot. So how many times have you seen it since theaters? Do you think?
I don't know. People would ask like how many times have you seen A New Hope or Phantom Menace or whatever. I've probably seen those 2 more than any other, and I don't even know how to begin putting a number on it. Right? I could say I've seen A New Hope 50 times, and I may be way underselling it or way over. I have no idea. I would guess Phantom Menace. I saw it 13 times in the theater. I've probably seen it.
Have you seen it more than 13 times at home, do you
15
think?
15 times since then, maybe? 12 and 15? I don't really know. I watch it with my kids a couple times. So I don't know.
Do your kids have a favorite Star Wars? And I know that we're sort of deviating from this, but I do want to know what Teddy's favorite Star Wars is.
Yeah, and I think it makes sense because I think like this gets back to something Brian was saying, and I may have written some essays about this in 1999. I don't know. But the idea that, like Star Wars is always going to, like the newest Star Wars is always going to appeal to the youngest generation, and they're always going to like latch onto that as their source story. And they can go back and they can go forward and whatever else, but that's always going to connect with them the most. And so, yeah, I mean, Teddy loves Rey and she loves like the sequel trilogy is like where it's like a frame of reference. And the girls love Mandalorian as well. They love Grogu. That's kind of their thing. But yeah, they've seen all of them.
It's interesting at the same point, John, and I think of you when I because I'm looking at your little video box right now. That's why I'm thinking of you. But in that as much of it's for kids, and I think that there is, it's still myth, and I think there are things in here that even though I never saw it as a kid, that kids aren't gonna latch onto, like everything. Sure. Whenever they talk about the difference between the living and the cosmic force, which has since become a huge thing in Star Wars, that all began here. The hubris of the Jedi and everything. Say what you want about Lucas's dialogue and some of the acting choices and whatever else, but I still maintain the overall, his overall story of the 3 movies and how the Republic becomes everything it was supposed to be, it was not to be, and how that happened is brilliant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
Dare I say it's the most cohesive of all Star Wars trilogies?
What, the prequels?
The prequels, in terms of like you're telling like a story, like because you mentioned before that A New Hope is really a open and ended film.
Right,
like, you can end it right after A New Hope.
Oh yeah,
Phantom Menace, it's the only Star Wars trilogy that really relies on all 3 movies to tell the full story.
I think that's right.
It's the only trilogy that was all directed by the same person, right? So like that's
also fair. Say, yep.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Because I don't want to bring this back to Fast and Furious. I don't want this to be like a 4-hour podcast, but we are recording this on the day that Justin Lin just stepped down from Fast 10. And there's something that like he came back for 9, 10, 11. There's gonna be like this trilogy to close out. And there's something I think about one man. I know it's also like Vin Diesel or whatever, like, but like there's something to like one person be like, these are my movies. I have this vision for this 3 thing, whatever. And like what they could have or maybe should have done with JJ for the new ones, right? Like they didn't, and they brought him back or whatever. And like that's just a mess. But whether you love or hate them, I think the fact that there's one guiding force behind a complete set of stories
always a bigger fish
is important.
There's always a bigger fish.
I think it's. I mean, you can tell. I think a little more with the original trilogy, as much as I love them, and there's no beating it. But there's, there's the brother, Luke and Leia are kissing in one movie, and she's the sister, and then next. That's not planned. There's nothing like that in the sequel trilogy. I think the sequel trilogy gets so much unnecessary shit.
Yeah,
and it's either too much the same. We want different, and then they gave them different. It's like too different. It's like, well, which one is it, Goldilocks? It's like fucking choose, because it's driving me up a wall. And my favorite of those is and Matt and I go at this all the time about this is Last Jedi, because
that's my favorite Star Wars movie. That's my favorite Star Wars anything.
Taught me things about Star Wars I didn't know that were there the whole time, and I was like, and I love. See, if it says Star Wars on it, though, I am easy. You know this. Matt for sure knows this. I am the easiest mark there is.
Yeah, me too.
So it's like, and if I'm not, it's like every episode of Resistance is for me. So I'm like, that wasn't my favorite. I'm sure it's somebody's. Every one of these is somebody's favorite. I remember back in the day that the amount of worst of lists that Attack of the Clones was on was absurd. And now it's like the anniversary, and all of a sudden, oh, it's my favorite. It's the best. I was like, where was this love back in the day?
So I want to on Attack of the Clones, and we're going to get back to Phantom Menace in a second, but I do want to, the point that you made before, Brian, that I think is a really kind of illuminating one, which is, I mean, I think that Attack of the Clones is the prequel movie that I would rank lowest of the 3 of them if I had to, but it's also the one I enjoyed watching at the time the most. And I'll say this, the stuff that's not in the movie, the storylines that are alluded to in the movie, if you watch closely and you figure out like who Sifo Dyas was and like what actually happened with Dooku, and you start piecing it all together, and it's this really fun mystery that you would just miss if you didn't really care. But then also like that this movie spawned Dave Filoni's like entire universe. Right? It really is Attack of the Clones that's all grounded in. And if it's a terrible movie, that would never happen, right? Like terrible movies do not spawn that kind of creative output. And there's always something good.
Attack of the Clones is a different movie if you watching all of the Clone Wars.
Yeah,
it just is. And not saying you have to watch all of the Clone Wars to really get Attack of the Clone. That's not what I'm saying. It's for me as somebody who loves the Clone Wars so much, and then going back, Attack of the Clones is different. It now, in light of, it's also as technology has gotten better and different editions. Matt and I joke all the time how many copies of these movies we actually have. Phantom Menace is interesting because I think it was the last one that you could get on VHS, and I did.
Yes.
And then DVD, and then another DVD, and then Blu-ray, and then another Blu-ray, and now 4K, and then 4K streaming. It's like I think that might be the one I have more of. Or actually.
If you own the VHS, you get the creepy Yoda, the before they replace
that's
the
thing.
Well, if you have the original DVD, you get that
weird puppet Yoda, and the DVD, which has one of the before Lord of the Rings came around, saying it's like, well, here's how you do special features.
Yeah,
that Phantom Menace DVD has some of the best special features ever, with the deleted scenes that they finished the effects for, and then that documentary.
There was a very fancy commercial for that DVD. So, they took that DVD very, very seriously.
That was back at the beginning of DVD. I was waiting for it. I was like, when is this going to come out?
This wasn't back in the beginning of I feel like everything. This was such an event. There was like Star Wars Pepsi. There was
yes.
Oh, I still have all the cans.
Oh,
I still have all the Phantom Menace cans.
I remember many a morning I was so tired. I'm like, I'm just gonna get a Queen Amidala Pepsi.
Yeah.
And
shut back in Jar.
Oh, Uriel Poof is on the side of this Pepsi. Okay.
Sebulba.
Yes.
Sebulba Mountain Dew.
Go to the booyah.
But there was so much about this movie out when you knew nothing about it. Like I had the poster, like with Anakin, little Anakin in the shadows, Darth Vader. I had the soundtrack.
Let's talk about
the
that.
movie came out.
Let's talk about that for a sec.
Yeah, I remember, John, you and I talked about that poster and it being just legendary at the time.
Yes. It was one of the, I mean, the Anakin with the Vader shadow poster is one of the great movie posters of all time.
Yep.
Yeah.
This movie, though, I have to say, like, one of the things about Phantom Menace that we don't talk enough about, I think it's pretty clearly the most visually beautiful Star Wars movie. And there's so many of the posters from that movie were literally just like stills from the movie because they were so gorgeous. Like the one of Amidala, like looking out the palace window as the Federation starships arrive and all that sort of thing. I every time I watch this now, like the one thing about Phantom Menace that makes me like, I almost gripe then about 2 and 3 is that Phantom Menace is just so aesthetically cinematographically, did I say that right? I think I did. It's just so amazing. It's like it's even now. I mean, like if movies looked like that now, I'd be really, really impressed. It is an absolutely stunning visual movie, and I don't think that gets talked about enough.
Well, I think you're right, because there's so many more miniatures than you think. The prequels get blasted a lot saying it's all CGI. Well, there is a lot of CGI, but there's still, especially with Feed and with a lot of the ships and with the Boonta Eve arena, all of those were all miniatures. So it was, and I don't think the other episodes 2 and 3 follow that suit. They ended up leaning more on CGI, but also you are having, for the first time, it wasn't the lived-in griminess of the OT, because we were so earlier.
Right.
These graceful, sleek lines of the Naboo starships and the shiny royal ship. It was off-putting a little bit when that ship came out. I'm like, what is this gleaming?
And now when Mando gets one, we're like, fuck yeah.
Yeah. And now we're like, 7 years later, I'm like, it's Phantom Menace. It's like we were talking, Matt and I were talking about this. It's like, it's really nice to see that beauty again, but it's like it took us a while to get used to it, but now that
like a beat up version of it, which is great.
But now that we've been with it for so long, you can't imagine Star Wars without it. It's as Star Wars as, say, some of the very original Macquarie paintings. And I think you're right. It is just so beautiful to look at, and it's a little depending on what resolution you're watching it in, it has a graininess and a contrast to it that 2 and 3 doesn't have. And that's not to say that 2 and 3 aren't amazing, don't look amazing.
Right, they do. It's a very different kind of a
but then on the other side of it, you have, they're doing all this with miniatures, but then it's in that documentary, the beginning, where they're saying this big battle at the end with the Gungans and the droids. I think it's John Knoll, who's obviously still around. I remember he says, we don't have a really good way of doing that right now. And they found out, and that was the first time that was done. And it was a little weird. You're watching computer animated fighting computer, and it's gotten refined and better over the years, but it was never done before. So the leaps and bounds, and say what you want about Jar Jar, and people do, but that was the proof of concept. Like, there would be no Gollum or Kong or Caesar without that.
Well, right. And the same thing, I mean, when I hear people complaining about like Tarkin in Rogue One, and it's like, Star Wars has always been an experimental ground for pushing visual effects. That we've gotten to like Luke in Boba Fett in such a short period of time, and people are like, "Oh, I can't believe they're just using Star Wars as a means of testing." Like, that's what it is. Like, from A New Hope, that's what it's always been. Like, this is part of its legacy, is that it takes risks. It does things that other studios won't allow, that other creators won't be able to do, because they have that cachet that they can sort of get away with things and then benefit other people. Like, you're not going to get to Jurassic Park, right, without like the Star Wars, without ILM and pushing the boundaries of what you can do with special effects. And
it's true. It's like there's Star Wars and Lucas, and now the torch being passed. It's like those guys are continually doing what you just said. I think Peter Jackson has added to that. It's like tried the 48 frames, didn't really work, but it was important to try.
It was.
I liked it. And then Cameron, every 10 years, when he's done deep sea diving for God knows what, pops up. It's like, here's this new thing. I don't know. It's more blue people, and this time it's going to be beamed into your brain. You'll watch it. It's 10 years.
Make this movie about
I make something every 10 years.
So that it's I can make Terminator 2.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You're going to watch it because it was 10 years ago that you watched my last thing. So shut up and watch. And that's really it. Those are the guys that have that cachet you're talking about.
Right. And I do also think that another sort of, I want to talk to Joey for a second because he hasn't said anything in a while, and I want to ask him because he doesn't know anything about Star Wars, and I think it'd be interesting to ask him what he thinks about
I don't know anything about Star Wars.
But I also, one other thing, and I think, Brian, you've talked about this before, and I think this is a really, really important point about what's great about the Phantom Menace, which is that one of the things, when you look at the aesthetic of the Naboo starfighters, and if you look at the kind of the beauty and the way that Coruscant functions and just sort of like the glitz of it, that a lot of people were turned off by because they associate Star Wars with that sort of broke down, used universe thing that they sci-fi, right, that they like. But to me, I think what's so crucial about that is, in order for the story to work, you have to have a sense of the world that was lost, and you have to think of that world as having flourished and been beautiful, and you can see it corroding in those movies, but you can also see why it's sad that the Empire took over and got rid of art and got rid of culture. And I think of like a show like Caprica, which didn't work because it didn't do that, right? Because it was like, I wanted to nuke it. It was so sad and boring and dumb. And I'm like, I understand the Cylons now. I'm like,
I liked it.
I liked
it too, but that's where they missed it.
1,000%. Yeah, I agree at that point. 1,000%.
And Star Wars got that right.
Just a very dumb question is Caprica's not a Star Wars property. That's a separate thing altogether. Or is that a Star Wars thing?
That's a Battlestar Galactica thing.
Oh my God, Joey.
Sorry.
Caprica was this close. I mean, that's a whole other podcast. But Caprica was this close to being so good if they just got.
It was that good.
It got really good at the end.
I liked it. I liked it.
I liked it too. But it was such, the world was a bummer, and I wanted to feel more connected to what was lost when the Cylons destroyed it. Right? And that's what I think it missed the mark.
It's interesting. Yeah, it's an interesting point.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Joey.
Yeah.
Do you like the Phantom Menace?
I don't not like it.
Yeah.
I want to thank Brian publicly that like maybe 2 years ago now, I'm like, Brian, you're one of the biggest Star Wars fans I know. If I was going to watch all of this in order, like what's a good order to watch it in? He like took some time and he gave me a list, and I watched this and I watched Attack of the Clones, and then I just stopped watching things. And it wasn't because of like I didn't like it, but I just like got distracted by other things. But I have this whole like, all right, watch this part of the TV show, and then if you want, hold off on these things and do these later. And I was just like, it's a beautiful list. I still have it saved. And I did nothing. I did none of it. And I don't think that I like Attack of the Clones, but I went into watching this one last year, not for the podcast, completely unrelated to the podcast, thinking I wasn't going to like it because this has a reputation, right? And I was like, actually, I'm kind of pleasantly surprised. I think it's actually pretty okay. Like, it's not my favorite Star Wars thing, but I don't dislike it. And I can't say the same thing really about Attack of the Clones, but also want to give it another shot, especially once I have the knowledge of Clone Wars, whatever. I like parts of this. I think Natalie Portman's a captivating actor, even though she's not given she's still figuring out her acting thing here. I like parts. I just, it's not exactly my favorite thing, but I like the movie. It's of the 4 that we've done episodes about so far for the podcast, I think it's my least favorite of the 4. But we've also talked about 3 other really, really good movies. So it's not really an indication of the Phantom Menace that like, oh my God, I like The Matrix and Eyes Wide Shut and Blair Witch more than this movie. It's like, yeah, those are 3 really, really good movies, right? Yeah. So,
I mean, I can feel Matt's seething at me because
I didn't do anything yet.
Well, no, because I think I said it's like now there are 2. Where do you start? Right, there are two big ways. You either start with Phantom Menace and go timeline wise, or release order with New Hope, or then you could do machete order, blah blah blah. It's like cut Phantom Menace, don't watch that at all. Yeah, F you. Watch them all. It's like watch every single one. Don't But in a way, I think New Hope would have been a better first view for you. I think it's like for someone brand new to
the
Star
original
Wars.
trilogy once or so. I have the Foundation. I've seen the new ones in theaters because I was just looking to, because like basically outside of the 9 main movies and Rogue One and Solo, I've seen virtually nothing. And so I was trying to have the context. I mean, I've seen the new Disney Plus stuff, but like I watched the new Disney Plus stuff. I was saying to John a couple days ago, I watched that because everyone else watches it. Like I'm not like, ooh, new Mandalorian or whatever. I'm just like, that's like part of the cultural conversation. So I watch it for that. And I enjoy that. I did not like Boba Fett. I liked the Boba Fett episodes that were basically Mando episodes. I didn't like the rest of Boba Fett. I don't think it was bad. It wasn't really for me. And so I watched those. I went to see the new Star Wars films the night they opened because like I know that everybody else is doing that thing, right? So, I still see the things. It's just
yeah. No, it's something Matt and I discuss a lot. I know personally, if I'm going to sit down and I'm going to do a marathon of all the Star Wars movies, I personally like to go from Phantom Menace chronologically all the way through.
Yeah.
Inserting Rogue One and Solo where they go.
And soon Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yeah. But if you're watching for the very first time,
there's something to be said for New Hope, Empire, and then the prequels, and then Return of the Jedi, and then when do you do Rogue One if you're gonna?
That's absolutely insane.
No, having said that, like anecdotally, I've now heard a lot of people who like Mandalorian has been their entry point, and they've gone back and like become giant Star Wars fans.
They like, oh, we love Yoda, baby, so we want. It's like, well,
what would he be like if he was old?
The actual Yoda. It's more of a It's like I want to see old Yoda. Oh, so you mean Yoda and actual Yoda because it's a different character.
And they're like, why do they call different colors?
Yeah, why do they call him Baby Yoda? Nobody does. That's not the actual name, but it's definitely more of a gateway thing than say. I don't know anybody who's like, oh, I started watching the Star Wars movies because of Bad Batch.
Yeah.
Very
small micro generation.
There's got to be someone. Because I still don't really know who Bad Batch is for, other than me and like 3 other like. Now there's, but if you're already
got like 15 episodes dedicated to Bad Batch, so
believe me, I know.
When they bombed Camino, I'm like in tears. That's
the thing when we're talking about all those years ago, seeing Camino for the first time, and now we're like, this is weird. This isn't Star Wars, and now we're seeing it bombed, and we're having these feelings. But that's like, I think Mandalorian's kind of for everyone. Bad Batch is for fans. Like if you just put that on.
I saw Bad Batch. I don't know if I did. I watched that anime one that I kind of like.
Visions.
We can do another whole episode about that.
Yeah, Joey, I'd put even money that you have not seen Bad Batch.
I doubt it.
It was on my list, and I think like when it came out, people were just like, "You don't need to see this unless you're like really into it."
You got to watch all of Clone Wars, then all of Rebels, and then
that's why I didn't.
You do.
Because I was like, I want to do
have to see it.
I want to do the prereq. I wanted to do my homework for Bad Batch. That's right. And then people were like, you don't actually have to see it. I'm like, well, I think I do.
It really is the next season of Clone Wars. I mean, it's
all of Clone Wars, all of Bad Batch, then all of Rebels, and then all of Resistance. That's how you do it. You got to do it all. You got to get those races. You got to get the races.
Matt Romano, I got a question for you. So
hit me.
You're 15 years old. You're like in episode 1.
I checked. I was 16. Just I was 16.
Thank you for that correction. I will.
Kitty Matt at AOL.com at the time. What was it, Matt?
It was KidMatt26 at AOL.com in 1999. So please continue with your question.
Sorry,
you liked it. So 2 questions for you. Did your 16-year-old friends like it as well? And why do you think people in general, the general consensus was like disappointment and didn't like it at the time?
I'll just be, completely honest. I mean, at the time I was disappointed, but I was trying to convince myself so hard that it wasn't bad, I think that's why I saw it so many times, like trying to find things that like I really liked about it.
Yeah.
And again, like just to stress that like years later, I love the movie and it's been enriched by so many years of more storytelling. But the reason why people didn't like it was because it was all, like we said before, it was that headcanon. It was that, for everybody had, 20 some odd years to think about what the Clone Wars were in their head. And I think it was, anytime you have a little kid in a movie, it becomes debatable. Little kids are tough, acting wise, they're easy to nitpick, Jar Jar. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in there. Like Brian says, it's for kids. And I think that the audience that was really pumped to see that movie were not kids. So ultimately it was disappointing to them, but yeah, it's really a fascinating Like they should. I'm sure somebody written a book about it, but
Yeah.
you know,
Cool.
the
You.
expectation and like the what happened henceforth.
Yeah, Brian, your personal friend, Anthony Daniels, around the time of the movie coming out, I remember he gave an interview where he was basically saying, like, if this had been the first Star Wars movie, if there was never a Star Wars movie before this, nobody would be talking about the dialogue. Everybody would be running through the streets like naked, singing the praises of this movie and being like, "Holy shit, lightsabers!" Right?
Yeah.
Do you think that's true? Like, do you think, like, have you ever thought about? I mean, that's one of the times that I started kind of falling in love with it as its own thing was when I conscientiously sort of went like, okay, I'm going to pretend I've never seen a Star Wars movie before, and I'm going to look at this movie objectively and try and like fall in love with its elements. Do you think there's anything to that?
Yes, I do. I think you're right when you're like, it's train yourself to let go.
Unlearn what you have learned. Yeah.
Yeah, it's or to quote a different Lucasfilm property, forget all you know or think you know. And it just open yourself up to it. Yeah, midichlorians are weird. Yeah, the Jake Lloyd is in over his head, but George Lucas will be the first to tell you he's not good at directing actors. And so him directing, a child, you tell him faster, more intense. That kid was getting nothing, and he was hampered by some.
It's working.
It's at least he wasn't the kid who's like, let's go and play ball with some of the worst ADR ever, because that kid is not saying let's go and play ball. It's over there, but it's like, and then he's also not Kitster, with this. But yeah, I do think I think people would have gotten past all that and have been like, because this is the first time, right? We're seeing blue, at the end of the day, it's green lightsaber up against blue lightsaber, fighting a double-bladed red lightsaber.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow. And also Williams, the legendary John Williams, it wasn't a typical Star Wars score either.
No,
because
that's true.
He used some legacy themes, but he didn't. The main theme was not used all that much. He brought in this big chorale thing with Duel of the Fates, which was a little reminiscent of voices towards the end of Return of the Jedi, but for the most part, choruses like that weren't used. It was different sonically as well, in terms of, that's what makes the beating heart of Star Wars is John Williams' music. So it took some time to get used to it and adjust. But yes, when I just let go, because I was similar to Matt, it was like the second time I was really like, let's make sure, because the first time I was like just stunned. I was like, I don't really know what that was. It wasn't what I was expecting.
Right, exactly.
What was that? And we had to adjust to. But I knew I loved some things. I love right off the bat. I love Qui-Gon from the beginning. I've always, Qui-Gon is one of my favorite Star Wars characters. I loved the lightsaber duel at the end. I loved the look of Naboo.
I loved pod racing.
Yeah, and now and now that we're adjusted to it after so many years, it's a classic. But at the time, it was an adjustment. But I think there is something to that. If this had come out, this was the first ever Star Wars movie. It would either be that, what he said, or it would be received like something like, Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets, I thought was
that movie.
I thought it was very underrated, and nobody cared. It's like, but if there was nothing like that, and that was the first one, and no imitators, because look at how many imitators Star Wars.
Yeah, well, that's what's annoying, and I think that's also true of Star Wars. It's that, like, what you're saying before about the sequel trilogy. That's what we call the 7, 8, 9 sequel trilogy.
Yeah.
That, like, people, they're like, there's nothing new. It's all sequels. It's all reboots. It's all remakes. I want something new. And then they make Valerian. They're like, this sucks. Why are we watching? Just like, make up your goddamn mind. Either support one or shut up.
We don't want new things. It's false. We don't. We want to feel familiar.
You do and you don't. If you want to, they did. It's Force Awakens. I don't agree with some of the structure and some of the plot points very similar to New Hope. Absolutely. I'm not going to, but is it the same? No, absolutely not. Is the real different one in the mix there is Last Jedi, and look what happened. So it's death threats and everything. It's when you get in there, and let's remember, that's when I absolutely lose patience and I wash my hands of the fandom. And that really started. It started before that. This is not new. This is starting in '83 with the damn Ewoks.
Yep.
And he's just he needs to sell toys. He didn't need to sell anything at that point. But now in '99, here comes death threats of Ahmed Best and Jake Lloyd, both of them driven to the psychiatric breaking point. Jake Lloyd has said numerous times being in that movie destroyed his life. It's like, you think at being in that movie and then going to high school, like right after it, is going to be an easy ride? That kid's life was destroyed, and the fans were part of it. Ahmed Best, same thing.
Yep.
That he comes back at all for Clone Wars and then Jedi Temple Challenge and stuff like that, and was applauded and everything at the last Star Wars celebration. Amazing to me that he even gives it the time of day.
And I think Hayden had a little bit of an advantage having seen what they went through, because I think the way that Hayden's handled the whole thing from day one has been really remarkable. He did the 2, and then he sort of faded into the background until he kind of felt ready. And I think until he felt like the fans had finally accepted it and accepted him and embraced him, and then just sort of worked his way back into it, and now he's really back into it, and I think that's remarkable. But you're completely right, and it pissed me off at the time, especially the way that I was seeing Ahmed Best being treated at the time was disgraceful. And it's the three of us are giant Star Wars fans, and it's just one of the things that comes with the territory. We know that there's a ton of toxic fandom in our little niche world, and it sucks, but
and not to excuse, there are some choices with Jar Jar that were obviously in poor taste.
Of course.
But I don't lay any of that at Ahmed Best's door. No. He signed on to do a role. He's an actor in a thing, and did the role on paper as he was directed well. You want to direct that upsetness, and that's not where it was coming from, though.
I know.
It's like the legitimate people that were like, these are offensive stereotypes. Yes, those are important. Those are important criticisms and important things to listen to. The rest of the nah, you marred my childhood and all that, please kindly shut up. Enough of that. Enough.
Can I ask a question? I want to bring it back to 1999 for a second. I want something that I did not experience or don't remember experiencing, and I mentioned it earlier, but how much about this movie was known before the movie came out in terms of the trailer, in terms of what was out there? Because I famously is the wrong word, but I don't watch trailers because I'm just like, I don't need to know what's going to happen in this movie. I know that I'm going to go see Doctor Strange. Like, I don't need to see the trailer. I don't want to have that spoiled for me.
Yeah.
And I remember, like, when I think it was like Amazing Spider-Man 2, like there was like 26 minutes or something of trailers that they had put out. It's like, why go see the movie?
It was all the best stuff too.
Right, exactly. Right. And that's what's frustrating. So I know, and I mentioned earlier, that I know that it was noted that people, pre-YouTube obviously, that people were going to buy tickets, would you say, to meet Joe Black to see the trailer, and then either sticking around for the movie or like leaving and going to buy another ticket for another thing or whatever. Like, I understand that was a thing, but like, how much about the Phantom Menace was known either through magazines like Entertainment Weekly or Nerd Stuff or whatever, or the trailers? Like, what was out there? Like, was Darth Maul? was he out there? Was the two-sided lightsaber was out there too?
Yeah. The crazy part is the toys. Like, I think Star Wars and the industry in general learned an important lesson from Phantom Menace, is that they flooded the market with toys. I mentioned this earlier, but didn't get into it. But the soundtrack was out to the movie way in advance of the movie.
Not that much. It was like a couple weeks, but yeah,
it
spoiled some scenes.
Spoiled the entire movie. There's like 3 track titles on that CD.
To this day,
ruins the movie.
Qui-Gon's noble end, followed by
Qui-Gon's gonna bite it.
The funeral.
Yeah. So like that was crazy, but like, but then also like we were talking about Duel of the Fates before. That was on TRL. That was like the number 1 video on TRL weeks before the movie came out. Like, you think about, like, there's so much stuff out there. Like, it was flooded, and I think actually that might have led to people's disappointment with the film too, because again, that headcanon, you're looking at these characters, you're starting to build your own narratives before you even see the film, and then you're just ultimately disappointed because it's not what it was.
They learned. They didn't say for Attack of the Clones, no shot of Yoda with a lightsaber.
Yeah.
That was like...
Yeah, they didn't do that. That's right.
Aside from reviews spoiling it, that was at the beginning of the internet and crank sites or whatever. And it's like, Yoda fights, oh my God. So if you read all that crap, you were expecting it. But I agree. It's like they blew a lot in the trailers, but not too much. They've learned. They've gotten better.
It's really interesting because Joey, like the thing is, the answer to your question is a lot, but also not a lot. Because the thing is, I knew kind of the world, and I knew the soundtrack, and I knew the Darth Maul, and like all of that stuff. I knew what like naked C-3PO looked like.
Yeah.
But when I saw the movie, I was still very much surprised with what I saw. Right?
Yeah, like Amidala, I remember being very confused about Natalie Portman and Amidala.
Yeah,
like because you would see pictures of her like as the big fancy queen and as like the little
and now it's
dress
Keira
or
Knightley,
whatever.
and you're like, what is happening?
Yeah. Well, exactly. And also Palpatine and Sidious, and you're like, is that just him with the hood on? And truly, there's more to it. In 2 movies later, it's like, no, that's exactly what it is. Yep. It's that easy.
Yeah,
and he is the Phantom Menace.
Yep.
It's as obvious as it is there.
Yeah.
And I love that ending. He's triumphant. Talk about acting, though. He's phenomenal.
The best
throughout in this movie and for the whole trilogy. And so is Ewan McGregor.
Because the only thing I can really compare it to is that when, in spite of me not watching trailers, when the Force Awakens trailer was released, the Alamo Drafthouse, when I was living in Austin, did an event. It was like 8:00 on a Saturday morning, and they're like, "Come here, we're going to watch a trailer, and we're going to talk about it. And we're going to watch a trailer again, and we're going to talk about it." And so they had, Tim League, the CEO of the Drafthouse, and they had like a writer for like Birth Movies Death, and they had like a fan, they had somebody else or whatever, and they showed it. I remember, and I will never forget, that in the trailer for The Force Awakens, which is a cool trailer, and I still really like that movie, but in the trailer where Kylo in the woods, the lightsaber comes up, and then the side saber things come out, like they like the guy next to me, and I don't want to make fun of Star Wars fans, 'cause I'm sure like it was a common refrain, but the guy next to me makes a noise that he's like, it's like he's orgasming. He's just like, and I was like, that's cool. But, like, it didn't hit me, but I'm just like, this guy, like, it's the coolest thing he's ever seen. And like, it was really cool, but I'm just like, I can't imagine like what it's like, back in 99, I'm sure it's the same thing. It's like, you've waited close to like 15 years, 20 years, whatever, since like main canon, main installment, main franchise, whatever. And then for something to like hit you with be like, oh my God, like this could be the best thing of all time is like, I have things that I've waited a long time for, but like 15 or 20 years, like seems like an incredibly long time.
Mm-hmm.
Like nothing comes back after 15 or 20 years. Like that's such, and this did it twice. It did it twice.
Yeah.
And it will again.
And it will do it again, yeah.
And in the next cycle, everyone will have something new to hate, and the sequels will be lauded as these untouchable works of genius. I promise you. I
think they're going to get the next trilogy right. I don't know. They're going to get it right.
Then they're going to be the one.
If we ever get away from TV, because I love where Star Wars is on TV right now. So maybe
we need to get back to the movies.
Do
Come
we
on.
know?
We need to get
okay. I sure. I'm just happy.
Do you mean
I am happy too.
The movies.
The movies.
I want to see what Taika does with a Star Wars movie.
Absolutely.
With that crazy ass font or whatever, and I'm just like, let him do whatever he wants to do.
And I want to see all this TV stuff culminate in some big 3 movie epic.
But no more movies. I want it all to culminate.
All the TV shows, everything.
But that's it.
A Filoni
no more
trilogy that finally closes the whole Clone Wars.
Exactly.
The Filoni
trilogy that really wraps up.
It closes it for good until next year when we close it again.
Right. This other trilogy is also part of that trilogy now, and then
it never stays away for long. How many times did we think the Clone Wars was over, and then even after 6, it's like, well, now it's done, and then they were like, it's coming back for 7. That was a draw drop moment. I might have been that fan, Joey. I didn't orgasm, and I didn't have to like change my pants or anything. But my jaw dropped the floor, and I said, "I cannot believe it."
It was pretty.
Like they're actually really cool. doing it.
No,
I
had a completely opposite reaction. I had like PTSD from Phantom Menace, being like, like
with the Clone Wars season 7.
Oh no, I'm sorry. The Kylo Ren's lightsaber.
No. Okay.
Clone Wars season 7, totally different.
That's when I had that trailer when that came. That was out of nowhere.
Yeah.
They kept that secret so well, and anytime they can keep a secret like that, it's like a draw. And Joey, there are things that you love that you would have that in another 15 years when the Fast saga is over, you get your first look at Vin Diesel cuddling up to little Brian is now grown up, is and he waddles in and says something like, it's like, that's because you don't have family. but they're coming back or something. And you hear vroom, and in comes his classic black car, and Letty's behind the wheel or something like that. You would give an orgasm sound.
Oh, for sure. 100%. 100%.
This is just not this is not your particular treasure chest of
on.
orgasms. No, I want to talk more about Joey and orgasm. Because here's the thing.
I'm here for it.
There's a lot on our show. Okay.
They're like poetry, right? They rhyme.
Yeah.
And so if you orgasm about Darth Maul's lightsaber, you're going to about Kylo Ren's.
Yeah.
What am I talking about, guys? I'm sorry.
I don't even know. Listen, I want to pick up on something you said earlier and then transition to another question for all you guys. So, I can't stop thinking about it because you made this point about the Williams music and the role that plays. I've long contended that like Star Wars, the Skywalker saga, ultimately is basically a beautiful, structured John Williams music video, right? Like the dialogue doesn't really matter. That's why I kind of overlook the right.
Yeah, it's like, does it have the music? Does it have lightsabers?
Does it have the music? Is it drawn? Is it painted by the music and the images and a storyline that is driven somehow through words? I don't really care about how many times someone says "Yippee" and "Wizard." I don't care. But it's a really interesting point because now that I'm thinking about it, I do remember that I always got this little like twinge of familiarity and being like, this is where I want to be in the scene, the early part of Phantom Menace when Qui-Gon is trying to push through the door with the lightsaber, which is badass, by the way, the melting metal with lightsabers.
We'd never seen it before.
We haven't seen it before, but the Star Wars, the main theme plays in the background when that's happening.
Yeah.
And at that moment, you're like, oh, Star Wars. And then you're like, then you go into this other John Williams stuff for the rest of the movie. It never comes back. It's all new after that.
Well, plenty of Force theme, but never the main theme.
Yeah. But having said that, now, again, it's one of those things where it's like all these years later, I think, first of all, I think the three best Williams Star Wars themes come from the prequels. And I think that's Duel of the Fates, Across the Stars, and Anakin's theme from Episode 1.
Yeah,
I just want to I can hear people like listen to this like getting chills. I don't know what any of those songs are. Like I believe you, but I can. Did you hear me?
Do you want me to whistle some bars? Yeah.
I mean, John, part of me is aghast that I can back you with Duel of the it's impossible to choose just three, but that you're leaving Imperial March and the Force theme off that list.
I'm leaving those off the list because that's like saying your favorite band is the Beatles. It's like, you know what I mean? Like those go without saying. I don't even consider those are in the ether. Those are like, you know what I mean? I don't even think of them as like, of course those two, but they're just like they're like the title. It's hard to talk about those as like, and as outside of themselves now.
Imperial March wasn't on TRL, burning up the charts, beating out Eminem and the Backstreet Boys.
That's true. Yeah. Matt's got a great point. Yeah, no.
You've got to look at Imperial March. But you know what I love about that track, especially Duel of the Fates, and at the time, and this has been talked about before, but this is what's great about hindsight, watching them, going back after so much fan service, but so much other things that fill in the blanks. It just enriches all of it. And if you don't want it, don't read it, don't watch it. It's like there's plenty of other crap.
Yeah.
But why call it Duel of the Fates when it's people at the time? It's like, shouldn't that ultimately be saved for Anakin and Obi-Wan? And it's like, no, because if that duel decides the entire rest of the 9 movies.
Yep.
If that duel had gone differently, if Qui-Gon had lived, I think you don't have Darth Vader, you don't have the fall. I think part of me thinks a stealth mission for Darth Maul was do this if you can't, kill them both if you can, definitely get rid of Qui-Gon Jinn, because he sees more than all the others and he doesn't play by the rules of the Jedi or whatever. He's going to be a problem. He is going to see through this, especially when I get to the Dooku shit that I'm going to start playing really soon. So it's over the fate of Anakin, who's going to take care of him. And if that had gone different, so it does it. And when they bring it back in Revenge of the Sith, it's briefly in one of my favorite duels in the whole saga. How amazing is that? And it's
it's also though, and let's get super nerdy here. It's also in Clones, and it's in exactly the right moment in Clones.
Oh yes, it's right before he finds his mom. It's these moments of Anakin's. It's the changing of his fate.
Beautiful.
So I just adjusted my glasses.
I just passed out. I passed out for a second. Hold on. Wait, what did I miss?
little shatter points where it's like, if this is like, there's still a way back at that point before this, but he's going into this, once he goes in that things and slaughters them like animals, there's no going back, really. It's like, that is a point of no return.
Yeah.
It's and right up until, though, Padme's pleading with him on that Mustafar platform, still like, yes, Natalie Portman is asking you to go with her anywhere.
Yeah.
She's pregnant with your child.
Yeah.
You say yes. It's like, I don't care if this wrinkled old man over there.
Yippee!
Yeah, it's like
Wizard.
So wizard.
Yeah.
Oh man, have how they've now canonicized where the phrase wizard started?
Okay, I want to bring up wizard for a second,
Yeah.
because for every movie for the show, for every episode, we're like titling the episode with one word from that movie. So like for The Matrix, it was "woe," and for Eyes Wide Shut, it's Fidelio, and things make sense. And so I
was going to be
John,
like, what is that, an orgy?
Yes, it's the password to get into the orgy.
I know.
And so,
I've seen it.
He's seen
I know,
the
but I'm
movie.
explaining to the people because I don't think that episode's out yet. Or is that episode out? No, this is the second episode.
This is the second episode.
Oh, I'm sorry, everybody.
Time's a flat circle. It's fine. But I say to John, because I try to guess every time. I'm like, for Blair Witch, is it this? He's like, no, it's this. I'm like, okay, cool. And I'm like, for this one, it's Yippee, right? It's got to be Yippee. He's like, no, it's Wizard.
Does it have to be one word? Does it have to be one
Wizard?
word?
We're trying.
We're
or two, but we're trying
like
to do
it kind of there's we're fitting into a space, so it's more like number of characters kind of. Yeah. And I'm literally watching the movie now, and I have no idea what wizard means. And he sends me a scene that I had seen 20 minutes earlier, and I was
it's
just
funny
like,
you say that. Brian wrote copy for our first episode ever of our podcast, or the description for our podcast. The first thing I ever had him write for the podcast, and he sounded like a madman because it ended with like, "It's gonna be so wizard." And I was like, what the hell are you like, is this? I had to ask him, like, is this a thing? And then because I missed it too.
And John was like,
you're checking the contract. You're like, is it too late?
I just didn't pick up of it in Phantom because it's really like one line. It's
as he's walking away from the camera, and John's like, well, in the new episode in Boba Fett, like Mando says it. I'm like, nope, didn't hear that. And he's like, fans will get it. I'm like, are you sure? So I'm not sure that.
Yes,
so,
fans of Phantom Menace, and now recently in the wonderful High Republic books, Daniel Jose Older, hundreds and hundreds of years before this movie takes place, this random character just starts saying wizard, and people are like, what is that? Are you trying to make a phrase catch on? He's like, yeah, I think it's funny. And other characters start using it. And the day that that Boba Fett episode came out and Mando himself said wizard, Daniel Jose Older is like, I know. He just kept tweeting, I've seen it, guys. I've seen it, because everyone had just read his book, and it's like, forget about the birth of this thing in the Jedi, or why Jedi don't marry, or whatever else. The birth of the phrase wizard happens in the High Republic books.
That's what I want Taika Waititi's series to be about. How wizard became like just a 3-part saga of how wizard entered into the lexicon.
We can all thank a character named Ram Jamaram, and I am not even kidding.
No, you're not.
I think you should call the episode Misa Like This.
No,
Misa Like This. That's the great Brian Blessed.
The great Brian Blessed. Yeah. Awesome cast in this movie, by the way. One of the best Star Wars movie casts.
You know what? One of my favorite, the one line that is awful, just awful on the page and awfully delivered. It's a Panaka line. And it's
of course it is.
And Hugh Quarshie, who also winds up with he gets a better deal. He complained after this in the press. He did the Shia LaBeouf after Crystal Skull thing. Yeah, he was like crapping all over this.
Well, Liam Neeson famously retired after this, so that's why.
I will also say, while we mentioned Crystal Skull, much better than people give it credit for. Shia, great as Mutt Williams. Yeah. I will go to bat for that movie. Please continue.
Oh.
Invite me on for the 2014 episode or 15.
Matt and I have been going at it since we met about this, because I love
the fridge. The podcast.
I love it too. Ooh.
But anyway. He's in Q Quarshie appears in one of my least favorite 2-parters of Doctor Who ever, the Daleks in Manhattan. I'm like,
with Andrew Garfield.
Yeah, it's like, and Garfield's not the problem there. It's this weird, it's the face thing. It's not bad. It's just not my favorite episode. So it's, but it's when it's like the sandstorm starts and he's outside the ship with Obi-Wan, and Ewan says, "Oh, this storm's going to slow them down." And Panaka looks out and he goes, "Looks pretty bad." And then he gets a call. And he gets a call. It's like, Panaka. He's like, let's go back inside. And that's his whole. It's like the pausing. It's like it's a lifted and framed line,
noticed that
like
before.
like it's from Shakespeare. It's like, looks pretty bad.
It's funny
it's
that's
all you've got to say.
Random stuff annoys me. Like that, I've never even noticed. And I'm totally seeing the scene now that you're saying it, and I'm laughing my ass off. But it's also like I love that Ewan. This is the only movie that he tries to deliver some of his lines in an Alec Guinness voice. And they're great when he does. Yeah. And I'm glad he gave it up and sort of found his own voice for that character. But like, that's also part of the charm. When he says, when they find us.
Yeah. I was just thinking that.
And it's like,
blast us into oblivion.
Blast us into oblivion. And I'm like,
and then
great.
He starts into our co-host Caitlin, because prequel Obi-Wan is her favorite character. Ewan Obi-Wan is her all-time favorite Star Wars character because of his sass. He is Sass Master General, and he is, I think, he gets away with that sass partially because if you look at Obi-Wan's Star Wars life, it's the most depressing story ever told.
Yeah,
it's how many loved ones.
Oh, and we haven't seen nothing yet,
including Clone Wars. Yeah, it's like, and now it's like, who important to him is going to die in his arms in the news show? It's like
probably that.
It's going to be Luke.
It's like wait, Luke. It's like here's a spin on the Kenobi show. Luke dies, and he actually wasn't Luke, and he
meets Ezra in the world between worlds. Takes a different doorway and kills.
Well, I don't understand it, but anyway, green light. Don't bring up the world between worlds.
I'll say that for another time.
Half of Matt's theories are based in the world between worlds.
Someone's gonna use that to solve to resolve an inconsistency at some point.
Reboot the sequel. Get rid of them. I don't like Rey because she's a girl. Use the world between worlds. All right. I know you're not saying that, but that's what.
We're gonna have a couple closing Phantom Menace questions in a second, but before we do that, let's talk quickly about the new Obi-Wan series because it's a direct sequel to the prequels, and it's awesome. And with that Boba Fett episode that was just the Phantom Menace nostalgia episode where like the Boonta Eve race happens, and it's awesome. And there is this like generation that's grown up with these movies that we always knew there was going to be, who are loving sort of seeing that story continue. Okay, here's a question. Is Ian McDiarmid in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series?
Is that a character or an actor?
Palpatine.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I hope so.
Me too. I can't see how they do it without him.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see how they don't pull everything out of the toy box for this show. Like
just
and it's not like he's going to say no.
And it's a limited series. It's not. It's only going to be one season, and so we already have like the big reveal that Darth Vader is going to be in the series, both as Vader and as hopefully Anakin. But I feel like there's some surprises yet to see, and that would be an amazing thing to throw out there, like episode 5.
Because one dumb fan theory that I read that I actually think might have some legs to it is, aside from the harsh Tatooine suns as what sort of prematurely ages Obi-Wan Kenobi by the time we get to A New Hope, there's a fan theory going around that part of the reason he looks so much older is because it's in fact Palpatine that ends up aging Obi-Wan Kenobi in much the same way that Palpatine aged himself when he lightninged himself in that little battle there.
I wouldn't hate it. Would not hate that.
If they're keeping that under wraps, I would not be upset to find
that's a reason to bring him back for sure.
Unspoiled. Yeah.
Even if it's just the voice, I could see just his cackle or something. Just that. I mean,
hollow
also if this is.
Yeah. Well, Vader's on the toilet.
Before Rebels or it's after Rebels. Okay, I was thinking they could even use it as like a stealth Thrawn intro, but the timeline's still
no, I hope we wait till Ahsoka for Thrawn, honestly.
I think we're also going to see some Tamora Morrison's going to get some Cody in there.
Yeah.
Oh God, I hope so. One of the shots looks like him. Yep. So in the
tone.
I feel like that would be a huge miss if they didn't do that.
Yeah. That's a dream because that's one of those things. It's like seeing Katie Sackhoff the first time, in Mando.
Yes,
that. Yeah.
If they don't do it here, I can see them doing it on Bad Batch. I can see like the Rex Cody reunion happening on Bad Batch.
Oh, I think that's kind of inevitable, but
Yeah.
yeah.
But I want to see Tamura and talk with Tamura, or Cody talk. It's like talk with Kenobi. It's like try and blast him off a wall again. It's like you might be needing this. Also this.
That and finally getting Keisha Castle Hughes as the live action Omega will be like those are my two.
Is that who you think they'll go with?
I'm almost certain they will. I mean, name another Maori actress.
Well, she's already the queen.
I know.
Well, of course you know.
Yes.
But well, they've done that before. They could do it.
Of course they have.
Queen of what? Queen of what?
Queen of Naboo.
Naboo at the end of.
Oh, right. Yes.
That's her.
Yes.
You had no idea.
I got that. Got that right away.
Anthony Daniels has played like 9 different characters, as has Warwick Davis.
True.
So you know.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, let's close with this on an upbeat note. What is your favorite scene in the Phantom Menace?
Oh man, well, I mean, absolutely duel of the fates. I mean, the lightsaber battle with Darth Maul.
But what part of it?
That's oh my god. I think it's the part when he kicks Obi-Wan or something. It's just like it's like a good he gets him with the.
You got to watch it like 3 times to see that, but it's awesome when it happens. Yeah.
I don't know. Gets a good jump kick on Obi-Wan. I love that part. Yeah.
All right. So Duel of the Fates in general, and that one part.
Yeah, I mean, come on. That's the most iconic part of it.
Darth Maul kicks Obi-Wan. Which is a great. I know exactly.
But if I can give you a quick just side note,
yeah,
okay, something that doesn't happen in this movie, but is my favorite thing to come out of Phantom Menace. Okay, so the pod racing scene, you know, Rats Tyrell.
Yes, I used to play with.
Familiar with Rats Tyrell?
Yeah,
Rats Tyrell. You know this guy. He's the guy that dies in the cave and he goes, and just dies. There's a great canon story about his son and his family being so distraught over his death that they form. I shit you not. That they formed the Rats Tyrell Corporation or Foundation, and they lobby to ban. Yeah, they lobby to ban pod racing in the galaxy, and they succeed. And I mean, it still happens in the Outer Rim territories, but they lobby to end pod racing, and that's the bureaucracy I was talking about.
Nice.
That makes Star Wars so fascinating.
I'm laughing at you, but also kind of love what you're saying.
Thank you.
You know, it's like the Elion Sleaze-Pagano redemption story. Where
fantastic. And my second favorite weird Star Wars aside.
Take enjoyment in something as cockamamie bullshit like that, then you're in the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Like you're looking in the wrong place.
Yeah.
I just crossed movie references.
Brian, what's your favorite Phantom Menace scene?
I mean, it's obvious. It's hard. Well, let's say aside from Duel of the Fates and the pod race, because I'm going to throw one on. I'll say that one scene that I've really come to love, and I think it's a genuinely, really well acted and well written scene between Jake Lloyd and Pernilla August. It's when they're saying goodbye, and she says, you can't stop the change any more than you can stop the sun from setting. And when he says, will we ever see each other again? She says, what does your heart tell you? And the moment from Jake Lloyd is like, I hope so. Yes. It's like, that's just a really real moment captured. Like there's no acting. It's heartbreaking. And that moment and that hug, and he walks away and he's following this mystic Jedi in the poncho and the Force theme kicks in. That scene always, if we're going to go with non-lightsabers and non-whatever, but that's just like, and that's the beginning, right? If she went too, if the mother went too, we would have still had attachment problems, but this is the beginning of the issues here.
Yeah.
It's also, I think it's no accident that the Force theme kicks up. It's like, well, here's another step on the road of destiny. And I know it's a little corny, but I love his line. I'm going to be the first one to see them all.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's he's this goofy kid. Yeah. And that's what people hated. This goofy kid turns out to be the worst villain ever. I was like, yes, that makes the fall. It's like, and I was part of it. I was saying that too, but now it's like, maybe it's just with distance. I don't know. It just, I can't see it any other way now.
Yeah.
Joey, what's your favorite scene?
I don't know. This is not a question I could really answer, but I will say that my 2 favorite characters that we've not really talked about yet are 2 favorite actors, I guess. I love Greg Proops as the pod racer announcer. I think he's wonderful.
Hell yeah.
And I got very excited this time because I don't think I recognized him or noticed him or whatever past viewings, but when Terrence Stamp shows up as the Chancellor, I was just like, hell yeah.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
he had a
That's
hell of a
right.
1999 that we're going
He
to cover
did.
in other ways later on the show. But to see Terrence Stamp, just like when you see him, it's just like, oh yeah, that guy means business. Like whether it's good business or bad business, or just if you want to be afraid of him, or I don't know, man. But the limey, like,
It's like 3 lines.
Always Terrence Stamp. Always.
I have 2, and one is kind of in Matt's camp, and one's kind of in Brian's camp. So I think those 2 answers were interesting. So the one that I think I'd have to sort of pick above all others, because every time, I mean, from like the staging of it, the timing of it, the music, the cinematography of it, is when Maul appears at the bay doors. Like,
Yeah.
it is just
that's it. That's
so
Yep.
fucking iconic.
I changed my answer. That's the icon.
And the losing of the robes and
Yep.
the first reveal of the second edge of the lightsaber, even though you know from all the toys, but like when you see it that first time, it's so intimidating and so awesome. It's one of the best sequence of shots in any Star Wars movie. From a kind of emotional standpoint, I don't know why this gets me every time, but again, it's something to do with like the way it's framed and the music cue and the cinematography is when Anakin gets the pod racer working.
Oh, yeah.
And it fires up and the music plays and he says it's working. And then you see Shmi's face and you see Qui-Gon, and it's like, it's the whole kind of like every element of the movie is just sort of in that one moment, and I think it's so beautiful.
And you realize in that moment how special Anakin really is, because not only can this kid like drive the pod racer, but fix it. You know, he's intelligent enough to build it, ride it, and be adorable, saying it's working.
You're gonna need those skills, because you're gonna need them to constantly rebuild your arms and legs when you're older. And it's like, and you're good at fixing things. It's like, yeah, well, you're not going to be able to fix the people that die. But that's gonna be a bit of a thing.
Can't fix a massive ego.
You know what music cue I know exactly the cue you're talking about. It's never heard again. It's this little motif that you don't hear again.
Yeah.
But I love when he blows up the inside of the trade ship and then flies out. It cuts in with a Duel of the Fates mixed with the Force theme. It's really gorgeous, and they reuse it in Revenge of the Sith when still flying half the ship when it comes in for the landing there. But that is and he bursts out, and the pilots are like cheering him on. And I always think whenever that scene plays, it's like, when I met him, he was already a great pilot. I was like, well, there he is. We'll try spinning. That's a good trick, right?
Yeah, it's funny, Brian, too, because you said that you called me out for not saying the Imperial March, but the Imperial March is in Anakin's theme in this really beautiful way.
Yeah,
it's so
right at the end.
It's like,
and as we drop a lot of times, Palpatine's theme.
Yeah.
Is right there in a major key. That's the celebration at the end. I love it when people are just discovering this for the first time.
Yeah.
There's so many TikToks. It's like, I just discovered this. It's like, no, you didn't. You saw this on another TikTok and you're hoping for your own things. But it's like, yeah, everything's great. It's in a major key. There's a Sith Lord in charge of us and nobody knows. And it's just, oh, what a brilliant little thing that is.
And Across the Stars is just the main theme inverted. So, you know. Yeah.
Yep. He knows what these
Williams, you crafty dog. Anyway,
I think he's got a future.
So Joey is going to ask you the last questions we ask on every episode, and I gotta say, I think at this point, Joey, they can't say the Phantom Menace, right? They have to say something else, right?
Well, that's the thing. I think we have to.
Aside
we need to amend the question, because it's a 2-part question. It's a similar question. But do you have a favorite movie from 1999? And I feel like the answer is probably Phantom Menace, but also maybe not. But so we could say, like, other than I guess if it's the Phantom Menace, give another one. If it's not the Phantom Menace, just give that one, and then I'll ask the follow-up question. But favorite movie from 1999, either 1 or 2.
Okay, so I was just looking at 1999 movies because I just had to remember what came out.
There were a few.
The Mummy came out in 1999.
Sure did.
Yeah.
Incredible movie. That movie stands up like is from end to end is such an exciting movie.
Oh, my dream.
And it's one of those movies I can't wait to show my kids.
Still my
it's
heart.
Just like love every minute.
I've never seen The Mummy.
Our first
Get the hell out of here.
Guest on the Matrix episode, Chris Cluey, that was his answer as well.
Yeah.
Really?
Yep.
Oh, well, all right. The Mummy.
Evelyn,
can't beat it.
My heart belongs to Evelyn Carnahan.
Yeah. And there's a reason everyone like is having this Brandon Fraser renaissance, and it's because how fucking awesome The Mummy is.
Well, and also how fucking awesome he is. But
he is too. Yeah.
And I would say the Mummy Returns.
Encino Man, sure.
Mummy Returns is also awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, the second
third one, not my favorite. I'll still watch it if I'm going to do it.
Wait, which one is The Rock? Is that 2 or 3?
That's 2.
Aku Machende!
Scorpion King.
That's 2.
And then Jet Li.
When The Rock was just in everything. I mean, he still is. But
that was his first big thing. He's like, he has like a line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Funny,
my brain just went to like
CGI.
A line and terrible CGI. Yeah.
My brain went to like The Rock is everything, and my frame of reference was he appeared in an episode of Star Trek Voyager, and he was in that movie. So that was him and everything.
Well, strangely enough, also in The Mummy Returns, if you blink and you miss him, is Jason Statham. Like
Get
shooting
outta
him.
here.
Yeah. I'm lying. That's not. He's like,
also 10 things I hate about you.
Freaking Scorpion King of it.
Matt, that's why we're doing a podcast about that year because
you know what? I just figured out what a great podcast this is. A lot of good movies to choose from.
Yeah.
Can you believe it? All right. So here's the follow up. Here's another question number 2.
Just best get year for movies.
We got to no. That's actually no, because that's hard because people are like, I don't know when things came out.
No, wait. Brian doesn't answer his answer.
He said like 8 movies. I thought there was an answer in there.
No, I have because if this is from '99, it would beat them all. Being John Malkovich is from '99.
Sure is.
Yeah,
that
would be my
damn.
My that movie changed the way I thought and looked at movies. I came out of that movie and said I did not know movies could be made like that. I didn't know they were allowed to be like that, and I hadn't seen a lot of the classics before that. I was sheltered, and I was just that changed my interests completely. Recently, I had another experience that I related much like that when I saw everything, everywhere, all at once. Gave me a similar feeling when I walked out of it as to Being John Malkovich. But that would be my pick for '99.
I'd like to change my answer to Varsity Blues.
Oh, okay.
For a second, I thought you were going to go with Mr. I thought you were going to say Mr. Ripley, which is also '99, right?
It sure was.
Yes, and Magnolia.
Yep.
And Moulin Rouge?
John, we got to do a podcast about this.
Oh, American.
Oh, yeah. Well, this is 2001. American Beauty. Yeah.
Hey, Brian, I got an idea for a podcast.
Good.
All right, John, we pivot to be a Star Wars podcast.
Good luck with the American Beauty episode.
So Brian, if so Mummy's already taken, unfortunately. But Brian, if you want to come back for our Being John Malkovich episode, that's going to be in like, I don't know, 8 months. But
I'm probably free.
It's all yours, my man.
Well, I mean, what am I doing?
I know.
Nothing.
Podcasts.
Nothing.
You're just talking to a microphone anyway. You might as well talk to us. Joey, back to you.
Yeah. So now here's the follow-up question. I think there's another caveat here. What is your favorite movie of all time? And if you say a Star Wars movie, you have to give another answer.
So just don't say a Star Wars movie.
But I mean, like if it's a Star Wars movie, say the Star Wars movie, then give
it's
another
Empire Strikes Back, but yeah. That'll be my answer, actually.
Is your favorite movie Empire Strikes Back?
I think so. You know this. I don't pick favorites, but like it's when people force me to say a favorite movie that it's either that or Contact. Those are the two that I'm always like.
I mean, the answer is Paddington too, but that's fine.
I immediately when people ask me that question, like I don't know, my brain immediately goes back to like when I was a kid and like what VHS tapes did I like burn a hole in, and it's like I'm not proud to say it, but it's like Independence Day.
Hell yeah.
I ate that movie
That's
up
one of my
as
favorite
a kid.
movies ever.
I eat it up as an adult.
You want to talk about like endgame moments
rules
in theaters? Like when I saw that in 4th of July, and you would think America like literally defeated the aliens.
Yeah, it was our high point, let's be honest. Yeah,
it was America's. It hasn't been the same since, honestly. Since we beat the aliens in '96.
It's all been downhill.
Yeah. But like Jurassic Park. I mean, just like the movies of my youth that I just like watched a lot.
The scene where there's the what do you call it? Like dogfight underneath the spacecraft in Independence Day is like one of the greatest.
Oh my god!
Cinematic moments of my. That was blew my mind.
It was like Fox 1, Fox 2, go, whatever the hell they say. Oh man, everything.
The David Arnold score too is one of
amazing movie, amazing
second
score,
only
special
to
effects.
His music for Stargate, which is my favorite score of his. But his Independence Day score when it kicks in.
I actually like Independence Day a little bit more, but I like them both, and I also know who David Arnold is, so that puts me and you and me in like the 0.004% of the entire.
That means we're cool.
That means we're very cool.
So, Brian, what's your favorite movie?
Amadeus.
Amadeus?
Yeah, that's my favorite movie.
Love that.
if I had to pick one, it's if I'm going geeky, like something like Return of the King would be number 2.
Mm-hmm.
But Amadeus is my favorite movie. What it
Cool.
says, how it makes me feel, how I relate to it. And that's not me trying to be artsy fartsy or anything like that. It's not only is it beautiful to look at and impeccably made, it's just what it says about jealousy and ego and resentment and everything. And like that's just perfect in every time I watch. It's like perfectly acted, and every time I watch it, I get something out of it.
I want an artsy fartsy pick, and I'm going to go with something more recent. Inside Llewyn Davis is a fantastic movie.
Okay, yeah. I mean,
and related Oscar.
You can pretty much name like almost any Coen movie, and I'd be like, I could see a case
Coen
for it.
movie.
I can connect Inside Llewyn Davis and Amadeus in the form of Moon Knight.
Yeah, and I know exactly how
that
right there. What you're about to say is one of the brilliant pieces of casting in all of Llewyn Davis. In that scene, that he's the one to shoot the dreams down, and it's like, who's going to do it? Not only is that scene wrenching as it is, but it's Salieri, who's ripping another artist's dreams.
Look how this all connected. See how beautifully that worked out.
And now, it's like poetry, man.
And now he's on. Murray Abraham is also Khonshu.
He's the voice of Khonshu.
So there you go.
Yeah.
And not in Mythic Quest season 3, apparently.
We're gonna find out in the next Moon Knight that like actually this is all Inside Llewyn Davis, and like that's.
I mean, do they want to sell tickets? So what?
That's the fifth identity of Mark. Is
I mean, the cat in Llewyn Davis is the Flurgle from Captain Marvel.
Oh, it all makes sense.
I think you mean a Flurkin.
Inside Llewyn Davis is in fact the first MCU movie, and we never knew it. That's going to be.
I'm sure Disney owns all of this.
Damn you, Feige! You are a genius.
Once Carey Mulligan gets woven in, John Goodman gets woven in. It'll connect. That's a good choice, Matt. I like that.
I like it too, Matt.
I just love that movie soundtrack. That's something that is standing up over these years as a new favorite, I would say.
And now everybody's going to know how sophisticated you are, and not just.
Like, see, I just had to put it in there. Independence Day and
he is very sophisticated. He puts on a lot of times. This actor, but I tell you, aside from his bizarre love for the starship Prometheus from that Voyager 2-parter. Matt,
don't get me started.
I don't know why you love that design so much, but aside from that,
it splits into 3. It's crazy.
And the dead pod racer, and
But why?
Yes, yeah. But I appreciate that, Brian. Thank you.
I don't know why that ship split into 3, but that's gotta hurt.
I guess we should wrap this up. I think we've said everything there is to say about Phantom Menace, and
is that
much everything else surrounding the Phantom Menace.
I guess based on that,
John Joey, I'd like to say I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry. If your listeners enjoy this form of hilarity, come over to Return of the Pod, a podcast about Star Wars.
I wish Caitlin could be here. Maybe we'll have you guys all for some completely non-Star Wars related movie from '99 that we can all talk about for just.
Hey,
for
that would be something. That.
Brian opens the show with Star Wars and more,
right?
And more.
Since we started doing that, we changed it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we can have you back from my one of my favorites ever, Mystery Men.
Ooh.
You know what? Never seen it.
Shut up. All right. That's really good.
I know. I guess
call me when you do Blast from the Past.
I'm saving it. I'll do that one. I get that one.
Sticking on my Brandon Fraser thing.
Brian Silliman, you would love Mystery Men.
I know.
Like,
it's got a lot of actors that are loving it.
What?
I guess I'm just waiting for the right moment while I'm still young.
You missed it, Brian.
Knock your socks off.
That Mystery Man train rolled right past you.
Yeah. I always get it confused with Small Soldiers.
Oh, very different. Very different. Very, very, very different. Mystery Man has the most insane cast I've ever seen in a movie.
Well, it's Jeffrey Rush, right? He's in it.
He is in it. But so is Greg Kinnear and Ben Stiller and Paul Rubens.
We can't do Mystery Men now. John, you talked Mystery Men at me the other day, and I could not believe what you were saying. So we're going to get to Mystery Men when we get to Mystery Men.
I know, it's going to be a while. Anyways.
Season 3, right? Season 3. People look forward to season 3.
Yeah, is that now or 4? I don't know.
Wasn't Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice 99?
You wish we could talk about that. Yeah.
I don't actually. You were
But I would talk about it. Yeah. I would talk about it.
There were no superhero movies in '99, which is
really
so weird because there was everything.
There was just so much more cinema, and cinema was better off.
Yeah, but there's a Bond movie. He counts.
You couldn't get this
Bond
made
counts.
today
There's no
because
Bond
of
in 1994,
Spider-Man.
I think the world is not enough.
The
1999.
world
Yeah.
is not.
November
Yeah, that's a good point.
99. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Do I
You
like
can't
that one?
kill me, James. Nothing cold blood.
No, you don't like that one.
I do like that
The
one.
world is not enough.
I like them all. Well,
Very
except for that
bad.
one.
Has the very worst line to end a Bond movie of all lines to end a Bond movie. And also,
Oh no, is that the
Yep.
Christmas one?
that's the
Yep.
Christmas one. And
Yep.
also the single worst performance in the history of cinema as with Denise Richards as a nuclear physicist.
Yes.
I also
just-
love Judi Dench escapes from prison with a clock.
My review on
I'm
Letterboxd
sorry,
for The World
I
Is Not
love it.
Enough was I genuinely can't tell if these are better or worse than the Connery and Moore and Dalton ones, but I do know that I enjoy these more, and that's good enough for me. Like they're just more fun. I just like it. I don't know. I don't like the. I don't know.
I watched GoldenEye on a plane recently. It was fantastic.
GoldenEye's
I
amazing.
love-
All right,
Yeah.
we're done.
All right, anyway,
You guys,
we're done.
tell the people at home how to find your podcast and what your address is, social security numbers, all that stuff. Go.
Oh, boy.
Go plug.
Well, you can find the pod on all major podcasting platforms. Return of the Pod, a podcast about Star Wars. We're at Return of the Pod on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all those places.
TikTok, look at you guys.
That's
Yeah, we're
right.
not
We have
doing
3 TikToks. I made them all. Brian, we're waiting on some more of those.
Keep waiting.
Then you can also find us at returnofthepod.net. That's right. We're the proud owners of the .net URL. So you can find us there. And then you find me on Twitter at Matt Romano, MatTROMANO.
I'm also on Twitter at Brian Silliman.
Thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you so much for having
Thanks,
us
John.
on.
Thanks for listening. We will see you in 2 weeks.
What kind of language barriers do you have? Is it anything goes, or like Matt has to do bleeping every time we like the fucks
Brian,
and
if the
shits?
scene requires it, then it is anything goes. You know,
Yeah,
if it's for the art,
sometimes it does.
you know.
It's so fucking wizard.